One Piece. After transforming into Ganyu, he joined the Straw Hat Pirates. Chapter 61. Death Blow. Explosive Star. Usopp steadied his trembling arm, pulled back his slingshot with force, and a projectile shaped like a scorching fireball whistled as it shot towards Chu, one of the three chief officers. Now's our chance, let's go together. Beside him, the bounty hunter duo, Johnny and Joseph, who had been waiting in ambush, immediately drew two gleaming great swords as soon as Usopp launched his attack. They charged forward, following the flying explosive star. Boom! Without surprise, the explosive star accurately hit Chu's head, exploding into a small cloud of smoke. It hit. Seeing his explosive star strike the enemy dead on, Usopp was delighted, but his expression quickly stiffened again. HMPH. Chu merely raised a hand to wipe his face, clearing away the ashes left by the explosion, revealing an undamaged fish man face beneath, even bearing a hint of mockery. Are you tickling me? Ho how is that possible? Usopp's eyes nearly popped out in shock. His strongest move, the explosive star, hadn't even managed to scratch the opponent's skin. In fact, the power of Usopp's explosive star at this stage was roughly equivalent to the flintlock pistol bullets commonly used by the Marines in this world. It might be enough against ordinary humans, but against fish men with their tough hides and physical strength far surpassing humans, especially a cadre like Chu, this level of attack was completely unable to break through his defense. It's all right, big brother Usopp. You still have us. As Usopp was still in shock, Johnny and Joseph had already used the momentum of their charge to successfully close in on Chu. Working in perfect sync, one on the left and one on the right, their two sharp longswords cut through the air, fiercely slashing down towards Chu's vital shoulder and neck. As bounty hunters who had been active in the East Blue for many years, Johnny and Joseph's strength was not weak. Working together, they could even contend with pirates with bounties of several million berries. However, the fish man race, while perhaps not much in the grand line where strong individuals were plentiful, could almost be considered a dimension-crushing force in the weakest of the four seas, the East Blue. With a muffled thud, Chu didn't dodge. He simply raised his two blue-skinned arms casually, effortlessly grabbing the blades of Johnny and Joseph's full-force downward slashes. Nani. X2. Johnny and Joseph were stunned by this sight, their faces filled with disbelief. This fish man, who had been trembling in fear just now because of Ganyu, was actually this strong. They desperately tried to pull back their weapons, but the two swords seemed welded into Chu's hands, unmoving. Humans, your fragility disgusts me. As if noticing their terrified expressions, Chu revealed a cruel smile. Then, he suddenly exerted force with both arms. With two, swish swish, sounds, Johnny and Joseph felt an irresistible immense force. The webbing between their thumbs and forefingers, where they gripped their swords, split open. The two long swords were forcibly taken by Chu and casually flung away, embedding themselves in the distant ground. Boom. After that, he once again swung his large, fan-like palms, knocking both of them flying. Now, only. After doing all this, Chu, with a playful smile, looked up, wanting to fully enjoy the expression of the last, little mouse. However, the long-nosed human who had been standing there had now vanished. Chu's smile froze, and he was stunned. Outside the gate, he just ran away. A clear, calm voice sounded beside him. Chu subconsciously followed the direction of the voice, looking towards the gate of Fishman Paradise. Indeed, the back of that long-nosed fellow was rapidly shrinking in his sight. In just a few seconds, he had almost escaped the confines of the paradise. Good heavens, he sure ran fast. Thanks. Chu reflexively thanked him, then took a step, ready to chase after the long-nosed man who dared to ambush him. The moment he took his first step, he froze in place as if paralyzed. He stared blankly at the blue-haired girl in front of him, the expression on his face changing from the cat-and-mouse playfulness of a moment ago to fear and apprehension. Aren't you going to chase him? Ganyu bent down and pulled out the two swords stuck in the ground. She held the swords, her eyes calmly fixed on Chu, her gaze deep. Or, do you want to stay and fight me? Yes. I'll go chase him right now. Right now. Chu's scalp tingled from her gaze, and he trembled all over, almost scrambling and crawling as he bolted in the direction Usopp had fled. For some reason, facing this human girl, he felt a fear stemming from his very life instinct, unable to muster any thought of resistance. Neck shoot. Sanji leapt into the air, concentrating all his strength and rotational momentum into one leg, delivering a fiercely powerful downward kick, like a battle axe, striking Kurubi's neck with a heavy blow. Bang! Kurubi took a heavy hit, grunted, and his large body flew backward uncontrollably. However, almost at the same time, Kurubi also countered with a palm strike, hitting Sanji's relatively vulnerable side waist. Ah! Sanji's expression showed pain, and he was also sent flying by the force, falling heavily to the ground and kicking up a cloud of dust. This exchange once again resulted in mutual injury, with neither side gaining a decisive advantage. Kurubi flew back over 10 meters before stumbling and regaining his balance. A burning pain shot through his neck, and his brain felt dizzy from the impact. But relying on the fish man's powerful physique and recovery ability, far surpassing humans, he shook his head and forcibly suppressed the discomfort within a few breaths. He looked at the human not far away, who was clutching his abdomen, his face pale, and his body swaying slightly, clearly more severely injured than him. Human, you can't possibly compare to a fish man in terms of resilience. Kurubi sneered. Sanji indeed didn't feel too good. Kurubi's palm strike just now was at a tricky angle, powerful and heavy, hitting the weak spot on the side of the human waist. He even heard the sound of his own ribs cracking. However, Sanji was far less severely injured than Kurubi imagined. The pain in his body was beginning to lessen and fade at a noticeable rate, and his broken ribs were repairing at a speed unmatched by ordinary people. This kind of recovery ability was very abnormal, but Sanji was well aware of it and even hated it from the bottom of his heart. Because this special recovery ability came from his genes and bloodline. Suddenly, a heavy, blood-scented back leaned against his, followed by suppressed, heavy breathing. He turned his head to glance and indeed saw a back with green mossy hair. At this moment, the green-haired man looked even worse than him. Multiple areas of his clothing were torn, his exposed skin was covered in fine blood marks, and the bandages on his chest, which had been wrapped around his wound, had split open, stained crimson with blood. Sanji frowned and said in a deep voice, "Do you want to rest? You look like you're about to collapse." At Burati, he had personally witnessed Zoro's duel with Hawkeye, and knew that Zoro was carrying severe injuries. With such injuries, an ordinary person would find it difficult even to walk, let alone fight. Zoro opened his mouth, gasping for air, his chest heaving violently, as if every breath tugged at all his wounds. His eyes were fixed on the octopus fish man in front of him, who held 6 swords and could attack him at any moment. His voice was hoarse but still forceful. "Just worry about your own fight. I don't need you to worry about me." Hearing this, Sanji pursed his lips and said nothing more. After all, they weren't very familiar yet. He pulled out a lighter from his pocket, lit another cigarette for himself, and recovered his strength while smoking. The brief 10-second rest period passed in an instant. Across from them, Kurubi and Hatchin seemed to have reached some kind of understanding. Almost simultaneously, they launched another swift charge towards Sanji and Zoro. Sanji and Zoro also separated at the same time, each going to meet their opponent. Clang! 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 Zoro and the octopus fish man Hatchin clashed in battle once more. After his battle with the world's strongest swordsman, Hawkeye, at the Burati restaurant, he had lost 2 of his prized swords. Now, with only Wado Ikimonji remaining, he couldn't use his 3-sword style, and his strength was greatly diminished. Moreover, he still bore a terrible wound on his body, inflicted by Hawkeye's black blade Yuru, stretching from his left shoulder all the way to his right abdomen. With each clash against Hatchin, the bandages wrapped around his upper body became a deeper crimson, stained by the blood oozing from his wound. Gradually, even the somewhat dull-witted fish man Hatchin sensed that his opponent was losing strength and was struggling to parry his slashes. So, he intensified his attacks, hoping to quickly finish off this human and then go assist Arlong. 6-sword style secret art, 6-sword dance. After a few more moves, Hatchin suddenly took a deep breath and unleashed his self-created strongest killing technique. His 6 arms waved simultaneously, the 6 longswords seemingly merged with him, causing his round body to spin at high speed like a giant, blade-covered windmill, crushing towards Zoro. "You The sharp blades continuously cut across his chest and arms, sending a flurry of blood, bandage strips, and even flesh splattering everywhere. The bandages were completely severed, and the broken strips, mixed with splashing flesh and warm blood, drew arcs of tragic beauty in the air. Zoro's face was distorted to the extreme from the pain, veins bulging on his forehead. But even so, he still didn't fall. Relying on instinct and will, he desperately blocked and parried Hachen's relentless attacks. His body also staggered backward in the storm of slashes. With every step back, a bloody footprint was left behind, covering the entire path he took. Enough. Just then, a figure descended from the sky. A barrier, condensed from ice-blue cold air, appeared out of thin air, blocking in front of Zoro, deflecting all 6 of Hachen's swords with a series of rapid, crisp, clink-clank sounds. At the same time, a fair, slender arm grabbed the collar at the back of Zoro's neck, dragging him backward. After being dragged several meters, Zoro finally managed to regain his senses, his gaze dropping to see the slender calves encased in black stockings. He recognized who was holding him, his face darkened, then he gripped his sword hilt and plunged Wado Ikimonji into the ground, forcing both of them to a halt. Who told you to meddle? Then, he suddenly turned around and roared at the blue-haired girl behind him with an angry tone. Thud. Ganyu said nothing, simply letting go of her hand. Zoro was caught off guard, his body losing support, and he fell to the ground, pulling at all his wounds, making him involuntarily suck in a cold breath. You. He angrily raised his head again, only to meet a pair of eyes as clear as glass and as calm as water. Zoro stared at her for a while. He didn't know how, but the nameless fire in his heart gradually subsided. The air solidified for a long time. Zoro sighed, slowly sat up, propping himself with his sword, and looked up slightly, his voice sounding somewhat helpless. I won't give up this fight, even if you try to stop me, it's useless. He had promised Luffy that he would not lose again until he defeated Hawkeye and became the world's strongest swordsman in the future. Now, having just left Baratie, and encountering the first decent opponent after Hawkeye, and having already engaged in battle, how could he give up halfway? Clang! 2 swords were thrown to the ground, and Zoro's expression instantly froze. Huh? Wasn't she here to stop him? He looked up, continuing to gaze into those eyes, and asked in confusion, what is this? Johnny and Joseph's swords. They won't be needing them for a while, and you just happen to be short too, don't you? Ganyu slowly squatted down, level with Zoro's gaze, explaining in a calm tone while extending a hand towards Zoro. Her hand moved towards Zoro's blood-stained, constantly bleeding chest. Before Zoro could react, a cool sensation covered the wound on his chest, making Zoro's body tremble. What are you doing? Zoro was a bit confused, not understanding why this woman suddenly touched his wound, but with her touch, it actually didn't hurt as much. However, the sensation was a bit strange. Wait, why is it sticky? What's on your hand? Kilin saliva. Huh? What? It's my saliva. Ganyu withdrew her hand, her tone calm and unwavering, but a faint blush imperceptibly flashed across her face. Saliva. Zoro's eyes instantly widened, staring incredulously at the woman's face in front of him. This inexplicable woman not only interrupted his battle, but also used saliva to insult him. He was about to curse this troublesome woman, but suddenly realized that the wound that had been hurting for several days no longer hurt at all. Could it be? He abruptly lowered his head, only to see that all over his body, flesh and blood were frantically wriggling, growing, and mending at a visible rate. In just a few breaths, all the gruesome wounds had completely vanished. His skin, originally covered in blood and scars, became smooth and even, without even a faint scar left behind. He was completely healed. Is this your ability? Zoro stood rooted, his palm repeatedly caressing his perfectly restored chest, his eyes filled with disbelief and shock. He was cured just like that. Sort of. Ganyu replied, her gaze also falling on Zoro, a hint of surprise in her eyes as well. She hadn't known if her Kilin saliva would work. However, recalling the numerous web novels she'd read in her past life where dragon saliva and Kilin saliva were miraculous remedies for injuries and illnesses. Therefore, she decided to experiment on the heavily injured Zoro. Even if it didn't work, she had only smeared some saliva on his wound, which was no big deal. But unexpectedly, the effect was so remarkable. If saliva could produce such a miraculous effect, then her blood, her flesh, Ganyu, lost in wild thoughts, was interrupted by Zoro's voice. What do you mean, sort of? Your words are always so ambiguous. Zoro habitually complained, but didn't inquire too much. What he needed to know, he would eventually have the chance to know. He bent down to pick up the two long swords from the ground, skillfully re-biting the Wado Ikimonji in his mouth, then looked up, his gaze like a torch, locking onto the fishman Hachi ahead, his fighting spirit reignited. However, with this, he moved his fully recovered body, feeling the familiar strength, a wild smile spreading across his lips. I can go all out without any worries now. Seeing this, Ganyu understood, raised her hand, and the ice crystal barrier that had been blocking the fishman Hachi in the distance silently dissipated into the air. Ya! As soon as the barrier disappeared, the fishman Hachi, who had been impatiently waiting, immediately let out a roar, his 6 arms gripping blades tightly, his body leaping into the air. His body once again spun rapidly like a blade-covered top, stirring up fierce wind pressure, agitating the air, and with an unstoppable momentum, he plummeted from midair towards Zoro and Ganyu. You're not the only one who can spin. Zoro's eyes narrowed, then, he aimed the tips of the 2 swords held in his hands and the Wado Ikimonji clenched in his mouth in one direction simultaneously. Immediately after, he powerfully pushed off the ground, and his entire body also began to spin like Hachi. 3-sword style. Tornado. The blades spun rapidly, and the powerful blade pressure created a tornado-like airflow. Vaguely, only a blue dragon's roar could be heard, soaring straight up. Clang! The fiercely descending fishman Hachi collided head-on with the soaring, sharp tornado. There was no imagined evenly matched fight. The 6-sword style secret technique that had previously overwhelmed Zoro, seemingly grand in its momentum, was no match for Zoro, who had regained his 3 swords and recovered his body. Ah! A harsh sound, mixed with the snapping of metal, rang out. All 6 blades broke simultaneously, and the terrified Hachi let out a scream, completely engulfed, swept up, and thrown high into the air by the tornado that rose from the ground. Thud! It took a full 10 seconds for him to fall from the sky, crashing through Ganyu's frozen pond, half his body sinking into the ice. Zoro smoothly sheathed his swords, making a crisp, click sound. He glanced at Hachi in the pond, then turned around and strode to the orange-haired girl who had been quietly watching the battle, naturally extending his hand and patting her shoulder with force. Well done, keep it up. Perhaps knowing that the damselet's body was unusually strong, he didn't hold back his strength, the pats making loud, thumping sounds. The damselet, caught off guard, even stumbled a bit. After steadying herself, Ganyu gritted her teeth, her gaze calmly lowered, falling on the large hand on her shoulder. She didn't speak, just watched quietly, counting in her mind. 1, 2, 3. When she counted to 3, the hand was still resting firmly on her shoulder, showing no intention of moving. Good. What is this? Zoro suddenly felt a bone-chilling coldness rapidly spreading up from his contacting hand, and couldn't help but look at Ganyu. Why was this woman suddenly emitting cold air all over again? Could there be another enemy? Just as he became wary, looking around, and was about to ask, the coldness suddenly erupted. Frost spread rapidly at a visible speed, starting from his hand pressed on Ganyu's shoulder, instantly covering his entire arm, then his torso, his legs. In the blink of an eye, Zoro still maintained his patting posture, a hint of surprise on his face, his entire being already completely frozen, transformed into a lifelike ice sculpture, standing at the edge of the fish-man paradise pond, meanwhile, at another battlefield. Shark skin palm bottom, kick up back of the foot. Kurubi seized an opening from Sanji, delivering a swift upward kick that struck Sanji's chin, sending him flying upwards with immense force. Fishman karate, upper level exploding palm. Without any pause, Kurubi immediately leapt into the air, his left palm filled with power, striking Sanji directly in the face like a heavy hammer with the trajectory of a hook punch, while Sanji was helpless in midair. Bang! With a dull thud, Sanji's face took a heavy blow, his nose instantly gushing blood, and he was sent flying backward like a punched sandbag, crashing through a thick wall and getting buried in rubble and debris. Kurubi landed steadily, slightly adjusting his breath, which was a little disordered from the continuous bursts of energy. Then, with the arrogance and complacency of a victor, he looked towards the corner of the ruins shrouded in smoke and dust. Human, this is the inherent racial difference between you and me. To be fair, this human, skilled in kicking techniques, was indeed the strongest opponent he had encountered since coming to the East Blue. But, in the end, he, as a fishman, had won. He turned around, full of satisfaction, preparing to leave and support his companions who might be in a tough fight. However, just as he turned, an extremely sharp whooshing sound suddenly erupted, attacking fiercely from behind him. What? Kurubi's body stiffened abruptly. In a critical moment, he almost instinctively raised his arm to protect his vital points. However, his hasty defense was useless. A steel whip-like leg shadow directly struck his arm, and with a click, it actually produced a bone-chilling crack. Kurubi's arm bent at an unnatural angle. Aha! The piercing pain made him let out a muffled groan. But Kurubi was also a battle-hardened individual. Enduring the severe pain, he immediately gathered strength in his other hand, attempting to counterattack with Fishman Karate's 100-tile true punch. However, the opponent's movements were faster than imaginable. He had just raised his hand when another leg shadow, like a phantom, struck, this time fiercely kicking him in the face. Neck meat kick. Kurubi felt his vision go black, his nose bridge seemed to collapse, and spurting blood blurred his sight. He himself uncontrollably fell backward. But the attack was far from over. The moment his body lost balance and leaned back, that figure appeared behind him like a teleportation, even faster. Back meat kick. A heavy backward kick struck his spinal column. Click. Another clear sound of bone cracking. Kurubi's pupils dilated from the kick, as if he had lost consciousness, and he softly collapsed forward like a broken sack. However, the storm-like blows did not stop because of his defeat. Shoulder meat kick. Saddle meat kick. Thigh meat kick. Chest meat kick. His legs became streaks of afterimages, continuously and fiercely kicking every part of Kurubi's body. Shoulder blades, ribs, thighs, chest, dull thuds rang out as densely as drumbeats. Under such a relentless onslaught, Kurubi's already unconscious body was like a constantly kicked ball, finally being sent flying into the air by a massive combined force. And it was at this moment, as his body floated in the air, that the final decisive blow descended. Mud and shoot. Sanji stood firmly on one foot, his body pressed down to its limit, pouring all his strength, speed, and rotational momentum into his other leg, sweeping it upwards from below in a graceful arc, striking fiercely. Boom. Accompanied by a colossal explosion-like sound, Kurubi, like a soccer ball powerfully shot, left a scattering of blood flowers and transformed into a meteor, rapidly soaring towards the distant horizon. With this, he was finally defeated. Sanji, following the force of his last kick, sat down on the rubble-strewn ground. He fumbled at his chest for a moment, pulled out a crumpled cigarette, put it in his mouth, lit it, and took a deep drag. Phew. A smoke ring was exhaled, along with his lightly laughing voice. Difference. After a long time. After finishing a cigarette, Sanji patted himself off and stood up, his gaze turning to the other battlefield he had been distractedly watching. In the clearing, there was an ice sculpture gleaming in the sunlight. This must be Miss Ganyu's work, truly an amazing ability. Sanji praised from the bottom of his heart, admiring the ice sculpture. Gradually, he suddenly noticed something amiss. Why does it look a bit familiar? Green algae-colored hair, 3 swords, no mistake, this was that half-dead guy who was still showing off earlier. But, what was the situation now? Thinking this, Sanji took a step, wanting to go forward and check the situation. But after only 2 steps, his gaze was involuntarily drawn to a stunning figure, unable to move away. In the sunlight, a blue-haired girl with small black and red horns on her head stood quietly to the side. She was wearing only a white short kipao with gold trim, beneath which were form-fitting black tights outlining her thighs and bust. She looked pure, yet with a hint of allure. Such a beautiful scene, who could resist it? Sanji instantly became infatuated, swallowed, his eyes gradually turning heart-shaped, as if drawn by an invisible magnet. He no longer cared about the green algae head. He rushed towards the damselet's direction, like he was possessed, with his arms open and a dazed smile on his face. Miss Ganyu. Ganyu, who was fully focused on observing Luffy and Arlong's final battle inside the main building, suddenly sensed a rather unusual aura rapidly approaching from her side and rear. Her gaze sharpened. She didn't even have time to turn and clearly see who it was. Based on a defensive instinct, her body subconsciously raised a palm and waved it backward. Click. A biting cold current emerged in response. And so, in the clearing of Fish-Man Paradise, another ice sculpture appeared. This time, it was a blond man in a suit, frozen in a lunging pose with his arms outstretched and heart-shaped eyes. Sanji. Ganyu fully turned around then. After seeing the figure clearly, the emotion in her eyes gradually shifted from surprise to helplessness. Never mind, let's just freeze together. She withdrew her gaze, refocusing her attention on the crumbling main building. Ever since Luffy and Arlong fell into it together, they hadn't reappeared, but the continuous roars, impacts, and loud sounds of walls cracking from inside the building all indicated how fierce and dangerous the battle within was. The entire building was already leaning at an exaggerated angle, bricks and stones constantly peeling off from above, emitting groans of being overburdened. It had clearly reached the limit of its structural integrity and was on the verge of complete collapse. Just then, a furious roar suddenly echoed from inside the building. Gomu rubber. Immediately after, an extended Gomu rubber leg, like a colossal pillar reaching the heavens, fiercely broke through floor after floor, smashing through the ceiling of the top floor, piercing straight into the sky. After a brief charge, it stomped down fiercely towards a certain target inside the building. Axe. Boom. A thunderous roar, as if it could shatter eardrums and shake the earth, suddenly erupted. Under the gaze of countless horrified eyes, the entire building, amidst the deafening roar, collapsed like a landslide, turning into a pile of rubble and stirring up a sky full of smoke and dust. Whoosh. Maps of the sea, from who knew where, floated in the air, gradually scattering from high above to the ground. At the highest point of the collapsed ruins, stood a young man with disheveled black hair. With one bloody, trembling arm, he firmly clutched a map of the sea. Tap tap tap. As a dense series of footsteps sounded, the fully armed Kokoyashi village people, led by Genzo and Nojiko, entered Fish-Man Paradise carrying a heavily injured long-nosed man. And it just so happened. They witnessed such a shocking scene. Everyone was shaken, stunned on the spot, not even noticing the long-nosed man they were carrying falling to the ground and crying out in pain. Nami. Atop the ruins, Luffy held up that hand, a sea map fluttering in the wind. His gaze pierced through the swirling smoke and dust, passed over everyone, and landed on an orange-haired girl with tearful eyes, saying word by word. You are our Nakama comrade. Perhaps the joy of victory was too sudden, or perhaps they were shaken by Luffy's emotional voice. Everyone remained silent, staring blankly at him. The entire place was silent, with only a suppressed, intermittent sobbing echoing in everyone's ears. It was Nami. Woo woo woo. At this moment, all words turned into hot tears. She could no longer speak. Covering her face, the grievances and pain of 8 years, combined with the joy of liberation, all transformed into 2 streams of clear tears that flowed from between her fingers. He won. He really won. The Arlong pirates, which had existed like a nightmare for 8 years, were finally, completely shattered. They were free. Oh. All the Kokoyashi village people reacted at this moment, and deafening cheers of ecstasy rose like a tsunami. For a time, the entire island was boiling. It is said that on this day, the cheers of Kokoyashi village even faintly reached another island thousands of meters away. After the battle, Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp, the 3 most seriously injured, lay side by side, receiving bandages from the old doctor of Kokoyashi village. Ganyu, Zoro, and Nami also sat beside them, chatting with them. Miss Nami, did you see my heroic posture when I defeated the Fish-Man Kadri just now? Only then did Sanji finally have a chance to get close to Nami. You must be the newly joined Sanji, right? Nami sat beside Ganyu, affectionately holding one of Ganyu's arms in her embrace, her head gently resting on Ganyu's shoulder. She looked at Sanji and smiled. That kick where you sent Karubi flying at the end was really cool, I saw it. This was her first time seeing Sanji. Ganyu said there was a perverted chef on board, so it must be him. Well, Ganyu wasn't wrong, he really seemed a bit perverted. Seeing him glance at her chest, Nami couldn't help but sigh. Another troublesome guy has joined the crew. Seeing him staring incessantly, Nami wasn't annoyed. Instead, she confidently puffed out her chest and leaned it against Ganyu's arm. Dong, Dwang. Sanji witnessed the entire process of its movement, its impact on Ganyu's arm, and its incredibly elastic rebound. Hiss. The visual impact was too strong. Sanji felt a rush of blood to his head, his nose felt hot, and 2 streams of bright red blood immediately shot out. Then, with an expression of immense blissful intoxication on his face, he tilted his head and fainted. Nani. Why is he bleeding again? Is there an undiscovered wound? Quick, call a doctor over. No, I am the doctor. The professional doctor from Kokoyasi village, seeing this scene, was flustered and rushed over to stop the bleeding. Idiot. Zoro, sitting cross-legged on Ganyu's other side, saw how this fool bled and fainted, and his mouth twitched. His gaze swept over the blue-haired girl and the orange-haired girl beside him, then he turned his head away disdainfully. Just women, how could they be as beautiful as the sword in his hand? But speaking of swords, Johnny and Joseph's swords had been returned, and now he only had one Wado Ikimonji left. It seemed he had to find a chance to buy 2 more swords. Ganyu. Luffy, lying on the ground, suddenly opened his eyes, shaking his head left and right, looking around. Where did Usopp go? Why haven't I seen him after searching for so long? Is there a possibility that he's right next to you? Ganyu reached out her hand, somewhat speechless, and pointed to his side. There was a human mummy, with its entire face wrapped in bandages, with only a long nose exposed. Ah, so this was Usopp. I thought it was a fish man. Luffy was surprised, then burst into laughter. Usopp, you look so funny. His laughter made Ganyu, Zoro, and Nami laugh along, and the atmosphere suddenly became extremely cheerful. Luffy, I also defeated a Kadri. Amidst their laughter, Usopp struggled to open his eyes and stammered, with a hint of pride in his tone. He, one-on-one, defeated Chu, one of the 3 great fishman Kadris. Although the battle process was a bit inglorious, he did win. Haha, well done. This is you, Usopp. Luffy grinned at the words and reached out a hand to pat Usopp heavily. Ouch! It hurts, you fool. Poor Usopp couldn't even dodge. Suddenly, a Kokoyasi village villager rushed through the door, shouting, "This is bad, the Marines are here." Marines. Everyone was stunned at the news. Why would the Marines come at this time? Did you see clearly which branch of the Marines they are from? Genzo frowned, asking the villager in a deep voice. It's. The villager opened his mouth, about to answer, but was roughly shoved aside by a hand wearing a white glove, almost falling to the ground. Of course it's me. A man wearing a marine cap decorated with a comical, mouse-ear-like brim, walked in with a waddle. Behind him followed a line of heavily armed, nervous marine soldiers. It's you. Nojiko's face immediately filled with rage when she saw the newcomer. This person was one of the culprits who colluded with Arlong and oppressed Kokoyasi village for many years, Captain Nezumi of Marine Branch 16. Tisk tisk tisk, I really didn't expect it. Captain Nezumi ignored Nojiko and the villagers' eyes, which were practically spitting fire, and clapped his hands as if no one else was there, pacing to the straw hat, injured members, a fake smile on his face. That useless bunch of Arlongs, they were actually defeated by you little pirates. But thanks to you, the money that was supposed to go to Arlong, and the treasures of the Arlong pirates, will all be collected by me, Captain Nezumi of Marine Branch 16. Captain Nezumi laughed wildly. After laughing for a while, he saw that none of the people present had paid him any attention, and his face darkened. How dare they ignore him? He waved his hand and ordered the marine soldiers behind him, go. Arrest all these lawless pirates. The Marines behind him obeyed the order, raising their firearms. In an instant, the muzzles of a dozen guns were all pointed at the 6 members of the Straw Hat on the ground. None of the 6 members of the Straw Hat were alarmed by this scene. Who's going? Zoro glanced at the blue-haired girl beside him and asked. Ganyu shook her head and smiled faintly, we don't need to act, someone will take care of them. As soon as she finished speaking. Thump, thump, thump. Another series of dense and neat footsteps approached from afar. In a short while, another group of marine soldiers, dressed in blue and white uniforms and greater in number, quickly flooded the scene and immediately surrounded Captain Nezumi and his subordinates. The leader, wearing a justice coat and with a resolute face, was none other than the Marine officer Ganyu had saved with an arrow earlier. His sharp gaze quickly swept across the entire scene, lingered for a moment on a blue figure, and then fell on Captain Nezumi, letting out a faint cold snort. Brigadier General Pudding. The moment Captain Nezumi saw this person, he was like a mouse seeing a cat, his imposing manner completely gone. Why are you here? Brigadier General Pudding from Marine Branch 77 was far above him in both rank and strength. Brigadier General Pudding's face was ashen, and his tone was icy. Captain Nezumi, I know all about your collusion with the Arlong pirates from the villagers of Husan town. Wait to face trial at headquarters. Nani? Captain Nezumi trembled with fright, still trying to argue. No, it's not like that. Brigadier General Pudding, have you misunderstood something? No misunderstanding. Brigadier General Pudding sternly interrupted him. Immediately take your men and get out of Kokoyasi village. If the official arrest warrant from headquarters had not yet arrived, you would absolutely not be leaving safely today. Why yes. I'll leave now. I'll leave now. Captain Nezumi's face was ashen. He dared not say another word, and taking his subordinates, he scurried away with his tail between his legs under the villagers' scornful gazes. After Captain Nezumi left, Pudding first appeased the people of Kokoyasi village, then ordered his subordinates to arrest all the Arlong pirates members defeated by the Straw Hat pirates. He completely ignored the Straw Hat pirates, who were only a few meters away from him, as if he hadn't seen them. Before long, Arlong, the 3 fish-man cadres, and dozens of fish-man thugs were all handcuffed by the Marines and taken back to the Marine warship. Before leaving, Brigadier General Pudding specifically came before Ganyu and bowed deeply. Thank you. This morning, at sea, it was you who acted and saved the lives of all members of our Branch 77. After expressing his gratitude, without waiting for Ganyu and the others to respond, he raised his head again and said firmly, but if we meet again on the high seas, I will still arrest you. After saying this, he no longer lingered, suddenly turned around, and strode away, following the team escorting the fishmen. The Straw Hat looked at each other, not saying much. Someone said, these Marines are quite interesting. Night, Kokoyasi village. A grand banquet, encompassing the entire village, began as night fell. After receiving news of the Arlong pirates' demise, not only Kokoyasi village, but also the devastated Gosa town, and other villages and towns on the island that had been shrouded in Arlong's shadow, all flocked to join the feast. The scene was bustling with people singing and dancing, sharing their treasured wines and foods, drinking heartily, eating meat in large bites, creating a lively atmosphere. 8 years of accumulated bitterness and suffering were all released tonight, through this banquet. Of course, most of the conversation still revolved around the benefactors who saved the entire island, the 6 young men and women. As the center of attention, the Straw Hat enjoyed the highest level of hospitality, with enthusiastic villagers taking turns to serve them delicacies, and the island's best chefs voluntarily cooking for them. Nojiko, Genzo, and the village doctor responsible for bandaging also sat at the main table, accompanying them for dinner. Luffy buried his head in eating, a stack of empty plates beside him already piled high, and continuing to grow at a visible speed. Zoro was having a drinking contest with several local residents, having already knocked out several big men, yet showing no signs of drunkenness himself. Sanji seemed to be in paradise, enjoying the delicacies under the enthusiastic care of several young ladies, maintaining a blissful, ethereal expression throughout. Usopp was surrounded by a group of children, gesticulating wildly and spitting as he recounted how he used wisdom and courage to defeat the fish-man officer Chu. Several children were so awed by his unparalleled bravery that they almost joined his Usopp pirates on the spot. Nami chatted with Nojiko, Genzo, and others about the past, and the conversation naturally revolved around Belmere, who raised the sisters, emanating genuine emotion, creating an exceptionally warm atmosphere. However, when the conversation came to an end, several people suddenly found their wallets missing. Well, there was no need to guess who stole them. Ganyu sat alone in a quiet corner, sipping the local wine, a faint blush on her cheeks, but her eyes were clear, peacefully observing everything at the scene. It truly was a peaceful and beautiful night. The next day, at the port, Morning light spilled onto the sea, creating shimmering waves, and the sky showed a hint of fish belly white. The Going Merry was basically ready to set sail. Luffy sat alone in his favorite special seat at the bow, the sea breeze blowing his straw hat off his head. Fortunately, Ganyu was standing not far behind him. Quick-witted, she firmly caught the straw hat in the air and then put it back on his head. Luffy quickly covered his recovered straw hat and laughed. Thank you, Ganyu. Ganyu blinked. Luffy, perhaps you could consider tying a string to your straw hat. Ah, that sounds like a good idea. Luffy scratched his chin, thinking seriously for a moment, then shook his head, but it feels like too much trouble. Leave it to me. Usopp, who overheard their conversation, immediately patted his chest and volunteered, I guarantee I'll get it done for you within a day. All right. Luffy thought for a moment, carefully took the straw hat off his head, and handed it to Usopp. Then I'll leave it to you, Usopp, please don't damage it, it's very important to me. Don't worry. Usopp solemnly took the straw hat, then turned and ran to the weapon warehouse on the lower deck. That place had now almost become his exclusive small workshop, filled with various tools and strange materials. It was said that, inspired by Ganyu, he had recently been researching methods to enhance the power of his Pop Green. Miss Ganyu. Miss Nami. I've prepared special drinks full of heart and love for you too. Sanji carried a tray, stepping nimbly from the ship's cabin, and in a few steps, he arrived in front of Ganyu. On the tray were two enticingly colored special drinks decorated with fruit slices. Thank you. Ganyu unceremoniously picked up a cup, took a sip, and felt the cool, sweet and sour taste bloom on her tongue. She couldn't help but exclaim. It's really delicious. It had to be said that although the ship had indeed become noisier after Sanji joined, her daily quality of life, especially in terms of food and drink, had truly improved by more than one level. Hey, Sanji. Nami hasn't come out yet, give the other cup to me. Luffy stared longingly at the drink, saliva almost dripping from the corner of his mouth. As he spoke, he couldn't hold back, extending his Gomu rubber arm, he reached for the tray in Sanji's hand. Sanji deftly turned to dodge, easily evading Luffy's sneak attack, and pointed with his free hand towards the deck leading to the cabin, saying in an annoyed tone. If you want a drink, go get it yourself from the kitchen. These two cups on the tray are specially prepared by me for Miss Ganyu and Miss Nami. He naturally wouldn't show favoritism, whether it was drinks or snacks, he would prepare a portion for everyone on the ship. Of course, some people didn't care about this at all. For example, the green-haired swordsman who was in the corner of the deck, focused on high-intensity training. Zoro wielded a giant barbell marked 1T, with one hand, his movements steady and powerful, sweat dripping from his body all over the deck. He had been exercising for a full hour. This guy. Sanji's eyes narrowed slightly, finally realizing where the sense of disharmony he had been feeling since yesterday came from. Zoro had been cut by Mihawk just a day ago and had endured a fierce battle in Fishman Paradise, so how was it that his injuries were already healed today? He suddenly remembered some details, his gaze involuntarily turning to Ganyu, just about to ask. Set sail. Just then, Nami's urgent shout came from the shore. She was seen carrying large and small bags, evidently having packed all her luggage, sprinting towards the port with a hint of urgency on her face. Hearing this, everyone on the ship immediately sprang into action. Luffy put aside his curiosity, Zoro put down his equipment, and Sanji temporarily suppressed his questions. Everyone performed their duties, quickly raising the anchor, adjusting the rudder, and hoisting the sails. The Going Merry slowly began to leave the port. Snap. The moment the ship began to move, Nami leapt onto the deck. Haha, now I can finally set sail with satisfaction. She let out a long sigh, a bright smile on her face. The crew gathered around curiously, their gaze falling on her. Nami gave a sly smile, reaching out to pull up the hem of her t-shirt. Clatter, clatter, a dozen or more wallets of various styles, as if by magic, fell from her clothes, forming a small pile on the deck. This is. The crew looked at this scene with some confusion. At this moment, almost simultaneously, a commotion came from the direction of the port, followed by angry shouts. My wallet is missing. What? Yours is missing too. I couldn't find mine last night. It's that thieving cat. You stinky brat. Give us back our wallets. Facing such a passionate farewell, Nami waved at them, hee hee, everyone, take care. And so, the Straw Hat Pirates once again sailed out to sea amidst curses, setting sail. One day later, on the Going Merry. Early in the morning, a newspaper-selling seagull landed on the ship's railing. After Nami's skilled haggling, the indignant newspaper seagull left a newspaper and a pile of bird droppings, then flew away with a coin in its beak. From now on, it would never come to this ship again. Usopp, remember to clean that up later. Nami didn't care. After all, it wasn't her turn for chores today. She walked along, reading the newspaper. A moment later, after only a few glances, her expression suddenly changed, and fine beads of sweat trickled down her forehead. This was a bounty poster. A few minutes later, all members of the Straw Hat Pirates gathered on the deck, staring at the newspaper in Nami's hand, their expressions varied, their eyes fixed. Straw Hat Monkey D. Luffy, bounty. 30 million berries. Usopp covered his face with his hands, letting out an incredulous scream. Luffy has a bounty, and it's 30 million berries. That's so much higher than Krieg and Kuro, who we met before. Ha 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 ha. I finally have a bounty. In stark contrast to Usopp's terror, Luffy was practically jumping for joy. Previously, Zoro and Ganyu both had bounties, but he, as the captain of the pirate crew, did not, which had actually been quite frustrating for him. But now, things were finally looking up. It's not just Luffy. Nami's expression was serious. She took a deep breath and pointed to the other side of the newspaper. Look here. Ganyu and Zoro's bounties have also been updated. They are now 16 million berries and 15 million berries, respectively. Wow. This news once again caused a stir of exclamations. Doesn't this mean their pirate crew now has 3 bounty criminals with over 10 million berries? Let me see. Sanji leaned closer, his gaze immediately locking onto Ganyu's new bounty poster. The blue-haired girl in the photo seemed to be standing on a certain coastline, with a bow in her hands, her ice blue long hair flying in the wind, her eyes focused and stern. Her entire figure was enveloped in a blurry frost, yet her exquisite, beautiful face could be clearly seen. Sanji gasped, his heart seemingly struck in an instant, and pink heart-shaped symbols began to uncontrollably burst from his eyes again. Oh, Miss Ganyu. No matter from what angle, she is so perfect. However, when his gaze inadvertently swept to the other side, the green-haired swordsman with 3 swords in hand, the background seemed to be the chaotic scene caused by the tornado move that defeated Hachi the Fish Man, a resolute face pulling a cold smirk for the camera. Sanji's enthusiasm instantly cooled, and he merely let out a dismissive, tch, from his nose. That guy actually has 15 million berries. 15 million berries, that's not low. Zoro also glanced at his bounty poster, his expression relatively calm. But his gaze unconsciously drifted to Ganyu's bounty poster next to his. They were the same at first, so why did she have 1 million berries more than him now? Although he was a little displeased, Zoro accepted this bounty, her strength was indeed above his. But, he believed this was only temporary. This photo, when was it taken? Ganyu stared at her bounty poster, her brows slightly furrowed, feeling somewhat incredible. The photo captured the moment she froze the whirlpool in the sea with an arrow to save that marine warship. The tricky angle and precise timing made her once again marvel at the professional skill of the person who took this photo. Nami, seeing everyone's carefree expressions, said somewhat irritably. Hey, all of you, be serious. We now have 3 people with bounties. When we land on the next island, countless people will surely want our heads. The next island you're referring to, could it be? Usopp seemed to have thought of something, asking thoughtfully. Everyone else also looked up, realizing something. Their goal was the Grand Line, and before that, there was only one island they had to go to. Nami brushed a strand of short hair from her ear and pointed in a direction where the outline of an island was faintly visible. Sailing a few more hours in this direction will bring us to an island. There's a famous town on it called Logatown. I know. Usopp excitedly blurted out, his voice noticeably louder, it's the birthplace of the pirate king Galdi. Roger. And, he was also publicly executed in the town square. The town of the beginning and the end. Ganyu softly uttered those words, her eyes gleaming slightly. For pirates born in the East Blue, that is a town one must visit. She turned to look at Luffy and asked softly, "What do you think, Luffy? Do you want to go?" Luffy's pupils slightly unfocused. He didn't speak for a moment, muttering, "The town of the beginning and the end." Logatown, this pivotal island located at the entrance from the East Blue to the Grand Line, due to its special geographical location and historical background, became the most famous and most chaotic place in the East Blue. More than 20 years ago, after Pirate King Roger's dying words, which ushered in the Great Pirate Era, echoed throughout the world, countless young people harboring dreams, ambitions, or simply seeking thrills poured into the sea. And Logatown, as the last stop for many East Blue pirates before entering the Grand Line, its reputation grew daily, almost becoming a must-visit checkpoint for every somewhat ambitious pirate crew. But that was before. Everything changed after a Marine captain, appointed from Marine headquarters, took over Logatown. For years, this captain named Smoker, with his overwhelmingly powerful personal strength and his terrifying devil fruit ability, known as a Logia type, had never let any pirate who set foot in Logatown escape. Logatown, therefore, was almost transformed from a pilgrimage site for pirates into a dreaded, forbidden zone. Ca. Captain Smoker. I'm really sorry, my daughter didn't mean to. Logatown Street. A young man was bowing repeatedly and apologizing to an unusually tall and muscular white-haired man, his forehead covered in sweat. Beside him stood a little girl with her head down, holding a misshapen ice cream in her small hand. The man called Smoker had a cigar in his mouth, and through the swirling smoke, one could only vaguely see his cold, somewhat fierce eyes. He lowered his head slightly, his gaze first sweeping over the noticeable mark on his marine trousers, then falling on the little girl who was almost crying from fright, his brow furrowed. Then, he made a gesture that surprised everyone present. "I'm sorry, my pants ate your ice cream." He pulled a few coins from his trench coat pocket, squatted down, and gently placed them in the little girl's palm, saying, "Next time, buy a bigger one to eat." Hearing this, the little girl first froze, staring blankly at the coins in her palm, then slowly revealed a sweet, tear-stained smile. The young man next to her seemed to wake from a dream, quickly pulling his daughter to apologize and thank Smoker again. "I'm truly sorry, Captain Smoker." Smoker didn't say much, just waved his hand casually, stood up again, and strode away. He had only walked a few steps when a group of young people entering from the town's entrance came into his view. Leading the way was a young man wearing a straw hat and a red vest. He was excitedly looking around, curious about everything in the town, like a country bumpkin visiting the city for the first time, finding everything fresh. Behind him followed 3 men and 2 women, each distinctive and very noticeable. A young woman with orange hair, a green-haired swordsman with a sharp gaze and a sword at his waist, a blond man in a black suit with curly eyebrows, a blue-haired girl with a unique aura and a pair of small horns on her head, and a long-nosed man. Smoker's pupils contracted slightly, his piercing gaze scanning the group. He felt that these people looked vaguely familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen them. Therefore, he just stood still, arms crossed, like a patient hunter, waiting for them to reveal any pirate characteristics. Upon entering Logatown, the Straw Hat Pirates members all had their own things they wanted to do. "I'm going to check out the execution platform. I'm going shopping at the mall. I'm going to collect some tools and equipment. This place seems to have good ingredients, I'll go take a look. Does anyone want to come with me? I'll go with you." "What? Ms. Ganyu, you want to come with me? That's wonderful. I also want to buy something. Luffy, can I temporarily have the money on the ship, huh? Where is he? He's over there, already gone. This guy, always in such a hurry. Here, I've already prepared it for you. 2 million berries in total, more than enough to buy 2 swords." The brief exchange ended, and the several people split up, heading in various directions across Logatown. Smoker stared at their retreating figures for a long time, eventually shaking his head slightly, turning and leaving behind only a finished cigar butt. Logatown, as the last stop in the East Blue before the Grand Line, was far more prosperous than ordinary islands. Wide streets were lined with shops, the shouts of vendors were endless, and pedestrians jostled each other. Merchants, commoners, or pirates and bandits with hidden identities moved through the crowd. A man and a woman strolled down the street. The man was dressed in a black suit, with golden hair, looking quite presentable, but his eyes were a bit restless, occasionally sneaking glances at young women passing by. Walking beside him was a young woman with blue hair, dressed in unique and boldly alluring attire, with a petite yet fully mature and charming physique, drawing the side glances of many passers-by. Look at that blue-haired girl, so beautiful. Is she a noble lady traveling from some country? I've never seen such an outfit. That blonde man next to her is so annoying. Whispers came from all directions, and two passers-by walking towards each other, engrossed in looking, bumped into each other with a bang, causing a burst of laughter from the surroundings. The blonde man next to the young woman, infuriated by this, yelled at the top of his lungs. Who allowed you to stare at the beautiful and charming Ms. Ganyu with such disgusting eyes? No one is allowed to look. But his shout, instead, made everyone aware of the name of this exceptionally striking young woman. For a moment, even those who hadn't been paying attention now turned their gaze. The two of them completely became the focus of the entire street. Ganyu, having lived two lives, had never received so much simultaneous attention from so many people. She felt her face burning like fire, covering half her cheek with her hand, feeling as if she was dying of embarrassment on the spot. She regretted it, she shouldn't have come with this guy. These guys are still staring. Seeing this, Sanji became furious, rolled up his sleeves, and was about to go forward to argue, preparing to drive away these passers-by. But after only 2 steps, he felt a cool, delicate touch on his ear. Then, there was a great force, twisting his ear, dragging his body back with it. Ah! Sanji cried out in pain, feeling that his body was powerless against this immense force, only able to passively follow along. Of course, he had no intention of resisting whatsoever. In fact, an expression of enjoyment gradually appeared on his face. He was forced to stoop, and her ice blue hair brushed against his cheek, bringing a ticklish yet comfortable rubbing sensation, along with a faint, subtle fragrance that permeated his nose, leading to endless fantasies. Aside from his ear being genuinely sore, it was simply an unparalleled pleasure. The two of them, under the astonished gazes of the passers-by, hurried through half the street until they turned into a deserted dark alley and finally stopped. Is it over? Feeling the hand on his ear loosen, and the close hair gradually move away, Sanji sat down on the ground, feeling a sense of wistful loss. Sanji, we came out to buy ingredients. Ganyu stood in front of Sanji with her arms crossed, her back to the alley entrance, glaring at him irritably. You just exposed my name. What if someone recognizes my identity and attracts the Marines in Logatown? She, Frost Arrow, Ganyu, had a bounty of 16 million berries, which was almost in the highest tier in the East Blue. And her appearance was particularly striking, blue hair, horns on her head, so anyone who had seen her wanted poster and wasn't face blind would find it very difficult not to recognize her. Although with the current combat power of the Straw Hat Pirates, they could no longer find any opponents in the East Blue. However, the Logatown was garrisoned by that Logia-type ability user, Smoker. Once he targeted them, their entire crew's shopping plan would likely have to be cut short. Hearing Ganyu's words, Sanji sat on the ground, looking up, staring blankly at her profile illuminated by the faint light from the alley entrance, and only said 3 words, so beautiful. Upon hearing this, Ganyu first paused, then sighed helplessly. Alright, this guy wasn't listening at all. She reached out, bent a finger, and lightly flicked the forehead of this dazed guy. Wake up, you idiot. Bang! Suddenly, a loud gunshot came from behind. A lead bullet, carrying sparks, tore through the air, heading straight for Ganyu's back. Ganyu frowned. With her sensory abilities, she naturally detected the danger behind her. Just as she was about to dodge, she saw Sanji, who was sitting on the ground, suddenly jump up. Under her widening eyes, he wrapped an arm around her waist, pulled her back with a fierce jump, and dodged the sudden bullet. The bullet hit the ground, creating a small pit and stirring up a wisp of smoke. You were saved, huh? What a pity, I almost took you out, Frost Arrow. A sinister voice came from the entrance of the dark alley. Several figures wrapped in gray cloaks, with varying builds, gradually approached. The leader held a pistol, its muzzle still faintly emitting white smoke. Who are you? Sanji held Ganyu with one arm, shielding her completely behind him, his gaze serious as he stared at these sudden enemies. This group of people concealed their identities, yet they could instantly blurt out Ganyu's title, making it highly probable they were after Ganyu's bounty. You ask who I am. The leading gray-cloaked figure let out an exaggerated and familiar laugh. This great lord wants to ask who you are. That curly-browed kid wasn't present in Orange Town back then, was he? As he spoke, he threw back his hood, instantly revealing a strikingly prominent, spherical red nose. Buggy. Ganyu, who had remained calm throughout, couldn't help but exclaim in surprise at this moment. She patted the hand on her waist, signaling him to let go, then stepped out from behind Sanji, scrutinizing the familiar red-nosed man she hadn't seen in a long time. For some reason, seeing this person made Ganyu want to laugh. She suppressed the urge to curve her lips upward, asking in a calm tone, Buggy, why are you in Logatown too? Ever since that kid sent me flying, I've been longing for the moment I could meet you all again. This belief has allowed me to regroup. At this point, Buggy clenched his fists, his expression incredibly heavy, as if recalling a past that was both unbearable and full of hardship. His voice even carried a hint of a choke. I experienced a clown Buggy adventure that had laughter, touched hell, and even gained friendship. His hands trembled, his tone gradually rising, and several of his subordinates behind him began to sob softly, understanding how difficult things had been for their captain. At that time, dragging my dismembered body, whether it was falling into the gaping maw of a sea beast, or the icy torment of the endless ocean, or the unpredictable harsh weather. I endured it all, for the sake of getting my revenge on you. Revenge. 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 The few subordinates behind him listened with tears in their eyes, raising their arms and shouting in unison. In response, Buggy also put on a look of deep satisfaction, enjoying the support and adulation of his subordinates. It was all these experiences along the way that forged him, Clown Buggy, into a future pirate legend. Sanji and Ganyu exchanged glances. Who is he? Such a big red nose is quite rare, isn't it? Sanji asked, a bit confused. Lower your voice, he dislikes it most when people talk about his nose, Ganyu whispered, feeling it was a bit impolite to interrupt someone so emotionally, recounting his past. I heard that. Buggy's face suddenly darkened. He pointed at Ganyu and Sanji and roared, you two, talking about my nose again. Ganyu blinked, a barely perceptible curve forming at the corner of her lips. Sorry, Sanji didn't mean it. After all, it's the first time he's seen such a prominent red nose, so it's understandable he'd be a bit curious. Oh, is that so? My nose is indeed very red and has a lot of chirac. Buggy stroked his chin, nodding subconsciously, thinking Ganyu's explanation seemed quite reasonable. But halfway through his sentence, he suddenly reacted, stomping his foot in even greater anger and shouting, you just said it again. You just said my nose again. Are you looking for death? As he spoke, he once again raised the pistol in his hand, the muzzle aimed squarely at Ganyu. Several subordinates behind him also raised their weapons, waiting for his command to launch an attack on the Black Alley. Just then, Buggy, don't be so quick to act. Have you forgotten our true objective? A mature and alluring female voice came from behind him. Click, clack. The crisp sound of high heels tapping on the flagstones rang out unhurriedly. A woman with a slender, fiery figure, long black wavy hair, and brilliantly fair skin emerged from behind Buggy. Objective. Buggy narrowed his eyes, as if just remembering something. Meanwhile, Sanji, who had been staring at the woman for a long time, couldn't help but exclaim, such a beautiful older sister. Oh. Hearing this, a smile appeared on the woman's exquisite and beautiful face. She turned to look at Sanji, her eyes sparkling, indeed, do you also think that I, Alvida, am the most beautiful woman on the sea? Alvida. Sanji murmured the name, his Adam's apple unconsciously bobbing as he swallowed, but he didn't reply to her question. He was lustful, but not foolish. He couldn't possibly admit that another woman was the most beautiful in front of a woman. Moreover, even though Alvida's beauty was impeccable, she still wasn't as attractive to him as Ganyu. Alvida was slightly taken aback, not expecting that her current appearance wouldn't earn a man's approval. She then threw another flirtatious glance, tossing her hair. Then I ask you, between me and the blue-haired lady beside you, who is more beautiful? Her gaze was playful, darting back and forth between Sanji and Ganyu. As for this question, Ganyu also felt a little curious, tilting her head slightly to look at Sanji beside her. Her eyes were calm and unruffled. The atmosphere suddenly fell into an eerie silence. Sanji's body stiffened. In just a few seconds, tiny beads of sweat seeped from his temples, trickling down to the collar of his suit. Logically, this question shouldn't have been difficult to answer. The person he favored was naturally Ganyu. But the personality etched into his bones made him unwilling to hurt another woman's self-esteem. For a moment, he dared not utter a single word, only allowing the cold sweat to flow. After a long while, Ganyu sighed silently, a hint of understanding flashing in her eyes. She reached out and patted Sanji's back. Let's go, Sanji. We still need to buy ingredients. Okay. Sanji looked as if he'd been granted a great pardon, nodding quickly. Then his gaze fell on the group of people at the alley entrance, and he hesitated, saying, "These people. It's fine, they're not looking for us, they're looking for Luffy." Ganyu walked straight towards the alley entrance with an expressionless face, passing through Buggy, Alvida, and several Buggy Pirates subordinates as if they weren't there. Not a single person stopped her. But just as Ganyu stepped out of the alley, a pistol was pressed firmly against the back of her head. Hey! Buggy stared at her back, his tone threatening, "My target is indeed your captain. But even if you want to leave, at least tell me where that Straw Hat Boy is right now." Ganyu's body froze, but she still didn't turn around. Her voice was faint as she said, "Execution platform." After speaking, without any visible movement from her, a sudden cold chill swept over everyone. Crack, a visible frost, as if alive, spread from the muzzle of the gun. In an instant, it coated Buggy in a clearly visible layer of ice. Everyone was stunned, then seeing Buggy motionless, like a statue, they shrieked in alarm. Captain Buggy. Alvida stared blankly at the retreating figure walking alongside Sanji, her face filled with dread. This ability, it's just two. At the same time, in the deepest part of the black alley, in a corner no one had noticed. A figure shrouded in a black-green robe, after witnessing this scene, shook his head with a chuckle, and slowly disappeared. "Boss, I want to buy a sword." A green-haired man walked into a weapon shop. He scanned the various swords in the store, then looked at the shop owner sitting at his seat. Welcome. We have antique swords, old swords, new swords, everything in the store. This shop is a 200-year-old establishment. The shop owner seemed to not have had a customer for a long time, and upon seeing someone, he immediately began to enthusiastically introduce his wares. Zoro didn't say much, directly pulling a heavy money bag from his wai. He weighed it, recalling the disgusted expression of the horned girl when she handed him the money. He hesitated for a moment, then opened the money bag, counted out half of the berry, and put the rest back in his pocket. "I have 1,000,000 berry. Sell me 2 swords." He placed all the money on the table, speaking concisely. 1,000,000. Hearing this, the shop owner's smile remained unchanged, and he greeted warmly, "No problem. This price is enough to choose 2 high-quality new swords in this shop." As he spoke, he led Zoro to the new sword display case, just about to recommend 2 to him, when he suddenly noticed the sword at Zoro's waist. "This is Wado Ikimonji." The shop owner's eyes widened, and after looking for several seconds, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. As the shop owner's voice just rang out, an astonished female voice came from outside the door. "Wado Ikimonji. Boss, did you just say, Wado Ikimonji, from the 21 great grade swords?" Then she saw. Standing at the door was a slender young woman with short, dark blue hair and red-rimmed glasses. Her gaze was burning, following the shop owner's eyes, fixed intently on the sword at Zoro's waist, as if she had seen some rare treasure. "You." When his eyes met her face, Zoro was also stunned, his pupils constricted, and his expression was filled with disbelief, as if he had seen a ghost. This face, it looked exactly like his deceased best friend Kuina. Meanwhile, the port market of Logatown was still bustling with activity. "Boss, what kind of fish is this?" "This fish is called an elephant trunk tuna. It must have swum over from the South Blue and I just happened to catch it." "Not bad, we'll take the whole thing." "All right." Young man, you're really straightforward. In the port market, after a brief conversation with the fishmonger, Sanji bought a tuna larger than a man. He hoisted the large fish onto his shoulder and excitedly approached a blue-haired girl who had been waiting for him for a long time. Miss Ganyu, it's done. Quite a fruitful harvest. Ganyu looked at the large fish, pursed her lips, and chuckled softly, then let's head back to the Going Merry, she said, then turned and pushed a small wooden cart beside her. The cart was already filled with all sorts of purchased ingredients, meats, vegetables, fruits, and various bottles and jars of seasonings, a dazzling array piled up like a small mountain, its height even comparable to two Ganyas. After they left Logatown this time, their next destination was the unpredictable Grand Line, and they didn't know when they would be able to dock again for supplies, so they had prepared enough food reserves for over half a month. Before long, the two returned to the Going Merry. On the Going Merry, there were no crew members, but there were many new items on the ship. Clearly Nami and Usopp had both returned once and gone back to the island to buy more things. After helping Sanji carry all the items onto the ship, Ganyu looked up at the sky, only to see dense dark clouds and the water elements in the air unusually active. This was a sign of rain. It was very strange. When they first landed on the island, the sky was not like this at all. It wasn't perfectly clear, but there weren't so many dark clouds either. These suddenly appearing dark clouds in the sky seemed to have been deliberately driven and gathered here by some force. Ganyu thought for a moment and said to Sanji, who was still organizing ingredients in the cabin, Sanji, I'll leave things on the ship to you for now. I'll go back to the island to look around and check if Luffy is alright. Okay, be careful. Hearing this, Sanji nodded. He also knew that Clown Buggy's group, unable to deal with them, must have gone after Luffy. But with Ganyu's and Luffy's strength, he didn't need to worry at all. Logatown Marine Base. Colonel Smoker, it's bad. Pirates are causing trouble at the execution platform plaza. A marine soldier frantically pushed open the office door and rushed into a room enveloped in cigar smoke. Pirates. Smoker was sitting in his office chair, puffing on a cigar, and upon hearing the report, his gaze suddenly sharpened as he asked in a deep voice. Where are these pirates from? How large is their scale? It's Clown Buggies and the Straw Hat Boys pirate crews. According to observations on site, they've gathered about dozens of people in the plaza and are currently confronting each other. Straw Hat Boy. The bounty poster was just released today. He's said to be a rookie pirate who defeated Chief Krieg, Arlong the Fish Man, and others. The bounty set by headquarters is as high as 30 million berries. The marine soldier said, handing 3 bounty posters of Luffy, Ganyu, and Zoro to Smoker. The pirate hunter and Frost Arrow, who caused quite a stir in the East Blue a while ago, have also become his crew members, now with bounties of 15 million and 16 million respectively. Smoker exhaled a thick puff of smoke, his gaze dropping to the bounty posters in his hand. What met his eyes was the smiling face of a boy wearing a straw hat, with the name clearly printed below Monkey D. Luffy, bounty 30 million berries. Smoker's pupils widened slightly, his brows furrowed tightly, and he turned to the other 2 posters. Indeed, just as he expected. One was a green-haired, fierce-looking 3-sword-style swordsman Roronoa Zoro, bounty 15 million berries. The other was the blue-haired, 2-horned girl who had also left a deep impression on him, Frost Arrow, Ganyu, bounty 16 million berries. It was the same group of people he had met at the town entrance earlier today. Crack. A vein slowly bulged on Smoker's forehead, and with a forceful grip, he crumpled the bounty posters into a ball. He had been tricked. Deploy troops immediately. Smoker suddenly stood up, quickly donned his marine justice coat, gloves, and a jeet weapon from the hangar, and swiftly issued orders. Have the 1st Division move out immediately, blockade all ports, and prohibit any ships from leaving. The 2nd Division will advance along the main streets, surround the execution platform plaza, and cut off the pirates, retreat. The rest of you, all follow me directly into the center of the plaza to make arrests. He strode out of the office, and as he reached the door, he paused and turned back to ask, where is Tashigi? Sergeant Tashigi left early this morning, saying she was going to the weapon shop to pick up a sword. The Marine replied. Smoker's expression froze for a moment. After a brief thought, he realized that the weapon shop Tashigi frequented was directly on the main route from the marine base to the execution platform plaza, so he said, then let's go to the weapon shop first. Outside the weapon shop. Congratulations, you not only obtained Sandai Kidetsu, but also took the shop owner's prized possession, Yubashiri. Tashigi pushed up her glasses, looking at the man with 3 swords at his waist, her eyes filled with both envy and a hint of reverence. Just moments ago, this man had done something she could hardly imagine. He gambled his own arm and won the favor of this legendary, cursed sword. That pirate hunter also uses 3 swords, and I heard he recently became a pirate, also using the 3-sword style, but I think you're much stronger than him. Is that so? Zoro's lips curled into a slight smile. By now, he had calmed his emotions and could look at her face serenely. You don't know that name. Tashigi was a little surprised by Zoro's calm reaction. It's a man named Roranoa, who actually uses his sword as a tool for making money, and even became a pirate. It's unforgivable. That name isn't unfamiliar to me, but whether someone is a bounty hunter or a pirate, it doesn't have much to do with you, does it? Being called out and cursed to his face was a first-time experience, and Zoro couldn't help but be intrigued, chatting with her for a few more sentences. Of course it does. Tashigi placed her hand on her chest, her voice rising slightly. First I'm a marine, and I will definitely arrest these heinous pirates in the future. Secondly, these evil forces control most of the world's famous swords, and one day, I will definitely take all these famous swords back. Oh. Zoro was momentarily stunned by her impassioned words, then laughed, including the 3 in my hand. Hearing this, Tashigi shook her head without hesitation, her tone sincere. Of course not, you're not a pirate. Moreover, these 3 swords might only shine their brightest in the hands of a swordsman like you. Is that so? Zoro looked at her deeply, not knowing what he was thinking, and said meaningfully, I hope you can always think that way in the future. After speaking, he no longer lingered, turned around, and with the 2 newly acquired fine swords, prepared to return to the Going Merry to show them to his companions. Of course, he also had to return the money bag on him to that woman. He wondered what expression that woman would have if she saw him acquire 2 fine swords without spending a single penny. However, he had only taken a few steps, not long after leaving Tashigi, when an invisible pressure instantly struck, causing Zoro to instinctively place his hand on his sword hilt. Zoro paused, looking up, only to see an extremely tall figure had somehow blocked his path directly ahead. The man merely stood there, and the shadow he cast almost completely enveloped Zoro. He had a cigar clamped in his mouth, continually emitting wisps of white smoke that stood out remarkably against the increasingly dim sky. He looked down at Zoro, his gaze icy. Hey, Roranoa, since you've come, there's no need to leave. You are. Zoro's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the white-haired man in front of him. His gaze fell upon the marine coat he wore, which was unlike that of ordinary marines, and his muscles involuntarily tensed. This guy has such a powerful aura, he's definitely not an ordinary marine. Just then, Captain Smoker. Tashigi jogged over, bypassed Zoro, and saluted the white-haired man, a hint of confusion on her face. Why are you here? There are pirates causing trouble in the plaza, Tashigi. Take your men and go arrest them first. Smoker ordered in a deep voice, his gaze firmly fixed on Zoro. Yes, Captain Smoker. Tashigi immediately straightened her back and responded, ready to follow orders and led her team, but the strange atmosphere made her realize something was amiss. She looked at Zoro, who was in front of Smoker, and asked hesitantly, Captain Smoker, is he a pirate? She hadn't heard Smoker address Zoro, but she could tell that Smoker harbored strong hostility towards this swordsman she had just met. Only pirates could evoke such animosity from this upright marine captain. Smoker glanced at Tashigi, a little surprised that she knew him, but didn't ask further. He said, Pirate Hunter, Roranoa Zoro, affiliated with the Straw Hat Pirates, bounty of 15 million berries. What? Tashigi's eyes widened suddenly, filled with shock and disbelief. She spun her head around, staring intently at Zoro. When he remained silent and offered no refutation, her heart completely sank. This swordsman, whom she admired, was actually a pirate. She pointed at Zoro, her body trembling, her voice suppressing a furious indignation. Roranoa, you've been toying with me this whole time. Aside from not revealing my identity, I haven't said a single lie, Zoro said calmly, but seeing that familiar face express such emotions, his gaze inevitably wavered. This is troublesome. Not only did he have to deal with a marine captain of unknown strength, but also this emotionally distraught woman. But you still deceived me. I thought these 3 swords would bloom brilliantly in your hands, but now it seems you're not worthy of them at all. Tashigi rebuked, her pretty face full of anger. Zoro's brows furrowed tightly, clearly a little impatient. Are you playing some kind of childish game? Worthy or unworthy, isn't just talk. Swish. Then I'll take them back myself. With that, Tashigi drew her sword, her eyes resolute, the blade pointing directly at Zoro. She was determined to reclaim the Wado Ikimonji and Sandai Kitetsu from his hands. However, a puff of white smoke drifted from behind her, like a rope, quickly wrapping around her waist and dragging her backward. Tashigi looked bewildered, instinctively wanting to struggle. A large hand pressed onto her shoulder, followed by a stern voice. Tashigi, my order was for you to lead the team to arrest the pirates. Didn't you hear me? Hearing that voice, Tashigi's eyes immediately cleared. She looked at her direct superior beside her, her voice unwilling. But, Captain Smoker, I want to. Enough talk. Go now. Smoker sharply interrupted her again, not giving her a chance to continue. With a wave of his large hand, the white smoke carried Tashigi away at an astonishing speed. He said to the Marines behind him, follow Tashigi and carry out the mission. Yes. The Marines responded in unison, closely following Tashigi, who was carried away by the white smoke, and soon disappeared around the corner. A smoke element user, huh? Zoro calmly watched the scene unfold, not too surprised. After all, there were already 2 crewmates with distinct abilities on the ship, so he was already used to it. Having dispersed the unnecessary personnel, Smoker's attention fully returned to Zoro. Roronoa, I don't want to waste any more words with you. He said in a deep voice, simultaneously reaching out and slowly drawing the jeet weapon from his back, which was slightly taller than himself and entirely wrapped in white bandages. You have 2 choices, either surrender, or be subdued by me and thrown into the prison cells. The fame of Pirate Hunter was something even he, a marine captain stationed in Logatown, had heard of. Though young, he had an extraordinary reputation in the East Blue. Now that he was a pirate, he even had a bounty of 15 million berries. If he and his captain were allowed to enter the Grand Line, they would likely grow into a major threat to the Marines in the future. Therefore, they must be eliminated here and now. Zoro shook his head, gripping his sword hilts, and drew both Sandai Kitetsu and Yukianagi. This action clearly indicated his stance. Sorry, I don't want either of those choices. Good. Neither of them was a man of many words. Just as Smoker's final, good, fell, he swung the jeet in his hand directly at Zoro. This strike was powerful and extremely fast, the weapon even making a whoosh sound as it cut through the air. Bang! A crisp clang of metal rang out. Zoro reacted swiftly, crossing his 2 swords in front of him to block the fierce strike. He felt a terrifying force, his body trembled slightly, the muscles in his sword-wielding arm bulged, and the veins on his arm were clearly visible. Oh, you actually caught it. Smoker was somewhat surprised. Feeling the resistance coming from the jeet, its strength far exceeded his imagination, it was not something he could simply push down. Then, how about you try this? Saying that, he clenched his free hand into a fist and suddenly unleashed his strength, like a cannonball fired from a barrel, directly striking towards Zoro's chest. Zoro had anticipated it. Almost at the same moment Smoker punched, he raised his other sword, firmly blocking the punch with the back of the blade, his stance as steady as a rock. He chuckled with a calm expression. Nothing more than that. The Marine captain in front of him had astonishing power with every strike, far exceeding all opponents he had encountered before. But, if it came to a contest of strength, aside from a certain person, he had never feared anyone. It's not over yet. Hearing this, a fierce glint flashed in Smoker's eyes. Then, with a bang, the arm that had been clenched into a fist suddenly exploded, transforming into a violently churning, compressed mass of white smoke. This mass of white smoke instantly generated a propulsive force, pushing the still solid fist at the very front, giving it a secondary acceleration, and once again heavily impacting the back of the Yukianagi blade that Zoro was blocking with. What? Zoro was caught off guard, feeling an unexpected immense force, like an overwhelming tide, coming from the sword. Ah! Zoro grunted, unable to maintain his footing any longer. He was directly sent flying into midair, man and swords alike, by this force. And just then, Smoker's entire lower body instantly completely elementized, turning into a surging mass of white smoke, like a jet propulsion system, propelling his upper body towards Zoro at an astonishing speed. Zoro's pupils constricted midair, his heart tightening. Not just his arm, but his whole body turned into smoke. This ability seemed quite different from Luffy and Gon. Do you still have time to think, Roronoa? In the blink of an eye. Smoker had already flown in front of Zoro, holding his jeet horizontally, aiming it at Zoro's head, and with the combined force of descent and charge, brought it straight down. In this critical moment, Roronoa was forced to draw his third sword, Wado Ikimonji, biting it in his mouth. With 3 swords, he clashed with Smoker's approaching weapon, the jeet. Bang! The hasty block clearly couldn't withstand Smoker's ability-infused strike. He rapidly descended, his back slamming heavily onto the ground, and a mouthful of fresh blood gushed out. But almost the instant he landed, Roronoa forcibly suppressed the pain in his back, swallowed the blood, and flipped up from the ground. 3-sword style. Tornado. The 3 swords rotated with his body, their pressure forming a current of air, coalescing into an upward spiraling tornado. The tornado shot upwards, scattering a mass of white smoke that had coiled around him like a spirit snake. However, the smoke, shattered by the wind blades, recoalesced and compressed in the blink of an eye, transforming into dozens of slender yet tough white ropes. They layered and entwined like a spiderweb, binding Roronoa completely. What the hell is this? Roronoa's pupils widened. Naturally, he wouldn't sit idly by. His entire body suddenly exerted force, muscles bulging, attempting to break free from the restraints. But even as he strained until his entire body turned purple and his blood vessels engorged, he couldn't escape the white smoke ropes binding his body. In fact, they only tightened further. Boom! It was also at this moment. A puff of white smoke silently appeared about a meter from Roronoa, forming half of Smoker's face, and then his entire body became visible at a speed perceptible to the naked eye. Roronoa, this is the end. His eyes were indifferent, his tall figure like a mountain, completely engulfing Roronoa in shadow. The jeet in his hand slowly rose, aimed directly at Roronoa, who was bound by the white ropes, and then swung down. He held nothing back in this strike, intending to severely injure this unavoidable pirate hunter, with a possibility of instant death. He would have no hesitation or mercy when facing pirates. However, a sudden change occurred. Unbeknownst to him, the surrounding environment had changed. The temperature plummeted, frost covered the ground, and fine snowflakes even began to drift in the air. Smoker's marine coat, his gray hair, and even the raised jeet in his hand, all became covered with specks of frost at the same time. He felt his body gradually stiffen, his movements becoming sluggish, and even the breath he exhaled condensed into white mist in the air. At this moment, a fair, slender, and aesthetically pleasing arm silently extended, landing on the path of the descending jeet, steadily blocking Smoker's full power strike without a sound. You are. Smoker's eyes involuntarily narrowed sharply. He looked in disbelief at the blue-haired girl who had suddenly appeared before him. His expression was startled, mixed with a hint of incredulity. This ability, how could this ability be so similar to that person's? And how did she get so close to him without him even sensing her presence? A series of questions flashed through his mind, but he had no time to ponder them. With a crack, frost began to spread from the jeet weapon. In an instant, it enveloped Smoker's entire body, turning him into an ice sculpture. The blue-haired girl looked at him with a complicated gaze. Then, she turned and slapped the white smoke ropes binding Roronoa. Cold air erupted, and the scattered smoke was instantly frozen into solidified ice strips. Bang! Seizing this opportunity, Roronoa exerted force, shattering them all, and they clattered to the ground. He moved his arms, which had been bound for a long time and felt a bit sore, then looked at the blue-haired girl in front of him and asked naturally. How did you get here? Ganyu glanced at him, then pointed to the sky. The weather is changing. We need to set sail quickly. Hearing this, Roronoa looked up at the sky and indeed saw increasingly clear dark clouds, covering almost half of the sky. This was a sign of an approaching storm. Then, he looked at the marine captain, who had been turned into an ice sculpture, not far away, and roughly pieced together his thoughts. As expected, the Straw Hat Pirates had been targeted by the local marines. If they didn't leave Logatown before the storm arrived, with the waves, strong winds, and heavy rain all striking at once, their going merry would have a very hard time leaving this island due to marine interference. How long can you keep him frozen? At this thought, Roronoa's expression grew serious. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, then said in a solemn tone, "This guy is a genuine monster marine." The brief exchange just now showed that Smoker's strength and devil fruit ability were arguably the strongest marine Roronoa had encountered since setting sail. He was incomparably stronger than Marine Captain Monka from Shell's Town. But fortunately, no matter how strong he was, he still couldn't contend with the monstrous woman in front of him. Ganyu thought for a moment, then said softly, "It won't last too long. Sanji is waiting for us on the ship. Let's find Luffy and the others quickly and head back to the ship." All right. Roronoa nodded, then turned and stepped, rushing off in one direction, "Follow me." "Wait, you're running the wrong way." Ganyu was a bit speechless. If she wasn't mistaken, the direction he was running was completely opposite to the port. That was precisely where Logatown's marine base was located. Nani? Isn't Luffy at the execution platform? Isn't that this direction? Roronoa stopped, crossed his arms, and looked at her with a puzzled expression. Who told you the execution platform is in that direction? My intuition. A long silence ensued. Ganyu sighed, "I see. Now I understand why you always get lost." This person relied entirely on intuition to find his way, and he was abnormally confident. He had never been to the execution platform, yet he firmly believed it was in that direction. It would be strange if he didn't get lost that way. Never mind. Ganyu rubbed her forehead, pointing in a direction. "The execution platform is this way. Follow me, don't run off, and whatever you do, don't trust your intuition anymore." "TCH, you might not be right either," Roronoa pouted, but his body was honest, following Ganyu's steps. Ganyu turned back, feeling uneasy, and gave him a deep look. "If you dare to get lost, I'll throw all the alcohol in the ship's storage overboard." What crazy talk are you spouting now, woman?" Roronoa's face changed drastically. He couldn't imagine how difficult the coming days would be if the alcohol really was thrown away. And this woman was perfectly capable of doing such a thing. Looking at the blue-haired girl who walked away without looking back, Roronoa couldn't help but quicken his pace, afraid of losing her. Just like that, the two gradually walked further away, disappearing into the street. And not long after they left, the ice sculpture emitted a faint cracking sound. A tiny crack appeared on the ice surface, then continuously expanded. A few seconds later, it exploded with a crash. Smoker broke out of the ice, his entire body covered in frost. "Who?" He gasped heavily, white smoke escaping from his mouth and nose, bringing with it a chill. His expression was volatile. After pondering for a moment, his lower body transformed into white smoke, and he prepared to fly towards the sky. But at that moment, a large hand forcefully pressed him down from the air. "You are." Smoker sharply turned his head, his pupils contracting in shock, cold sweat beading on his forehead, his eyes filled with unspeakable horror. Boom! A bolt of lightning streaked across the sky, descending in a terrifying manner and striking heavily upon the execution platform. In the square, the crowd was dumbfounded, for a moment even forgetting to breathe. The air solidified for a few seconds. "Buggy, Captain." On the execution platform, Mochi and Kabaji looked at their captain, who had been charred black by the lightning, and couldn't help but wail in sorrow. How could Captain Buggy, who was perfectly fine a second ago, suddenly be struck by lightning? "Oh, I'm not dead. Ha 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 ha." To the side, a straw hat boy escaped from the execution stand, patted his straw hat, and laughed with immense relief. Just moments ago, he was still on the execution platform imagining what Roger must have felt when he was executed. The Buggy pirates, whom he had defeated before, suddenly arrived and, catching him off guard, used an execution stand to pin him to the ground. Buggy, wrapped in a padded jacket, raised his large saber, seemingly intending to execute him on the spot. In such a desperate situation, with his companions not by his side, Luffy had thought he was going to die, but he never expected a lightning bolt from the sky to save his life. Below, Alvida and the other members of the Buggy Pirates also watched this scene with immense shock. Buggy was struck by lightning. On the other side, Tashigi, leading a squad of Marines, had just arrived at the scene and witnessed what could only be described as a miracle. Her beautiful eyes were wide with astonishment. This Straw Hat Boy is Roronoa's captain. What a formidable fellow. To still be able to smile before death. Even Colonel Smoker would be surprised to see this, wouldn't he? Wait, as soon as Smoker came to mind, Tashigi remembered Smoker's mission for her to come here, and immediately drew her sword, rushing out first. Move out. Arrest all pirates in the execution platform square. Yes. The Marines had been waiting impatiently. Hearing the highest-ranking officer on site give the order, they all rushed towards the Buggy Pirates members in the square, brandishing their firearms and weapons. Suddenly, the square became chaotic. The onlookers, learning that the Marines were about to fight the pirates, hurriedly fled the scene. The pirates had not expected the Marines to appear at this time. Instantly, several pirates were hit by bullets and fell to the ground. Alvida was also hit by a bullet, but after the bullet pierced her clothes, it was deflected by her skin. What's going on? A Marine, firing his gun, watched this scene with a look of horror. Bang! Alvida swung her mace, hitting the Marine with one blow, and then shouted at the several people still in a daze on the execution platform. What are you standing around for? Grab Buggy and run. She had followed Buggy this time to seek revenge on the Straw Hat. But this trip was far from as smooth as she had imagined. First, she encountered the Frost Arrow, who possessed terrifying abilities. Now, she personally witnessed the Straw Hat, who seemed to be blessed by the heavens. She vaguely felt that this group of people was definitely not someone she could provoke, and she abandoned the idea of seeking revenge on the Straw Hat. Hearing her voice, run! Kabaji and Mochi finally came to their senses, carried the lightning-struck Buggy, who was charred black, and fled, crying all the while. Only Luffy remained standing on the execution platform, staring blankly at the chaotic scene below, tilting his head. What's happening? After watching for a long time, when he saw a female Marine with a sword rushing towards the execution platform, Luffy finally understood the seriousness of the situation. Oh no, it's the Marines. Everyone, run! Luffy cried out. Then he scanned around and realized that there was no one left beside him. So everyone has already run off. Luffy slapped his forehead, a little surprised. At this moment, two anxious shouts came from below. Luffy! Get down here! Run, you idiot! Luffy saw the two, a long-nosed man and an orange-haired girl below the square, and couldn't help but exclaim with joy. Nami! Usopp! At the same time, in a short period, Tashigi had already rushed onto the execution platform with her sword drawn. Due to Smoker's interference, her resentment towards the pirate hunter for mocking her could now only be unleashed upon his captain. Whoosh! Still several meters away, Tashigi raised her sword and charged towards Luffy's back in a standard bayonet stance. But Luffy didn't even turn his head, as if he had eyes on the back of his head. He subtly shifted his body, dodging the sharp strike. Tashigi was a bit bewildered. She had put all her strength into that strike. She didn't hit Luffy, but her body lunged further forward. Ahead was a drop of dozens of meters. She wasn't a devil fruit user. If she fell, wouldn't she be instantly killed? Ah! Tashigi let out a desperate cry, watching helplessly as she rushed off the execution platform. However, just at this critical moment, Luffy, who had turned halfway, suddenly reached out and grabbed Tashigi's shoulder, which was halfway off the execution platform. With a forceful pull, he actually yanked her back. Then, under Tashigi's gaze, he used the momentum, took a step, and leapt into the air. Tashigi, who had fallen back onto the ground, could only see his back. Ha ha ha. Setting sail. Luffy stretched his Gomu rubber arm in the air, grabbed a beam below, and with a whoosh, he slingshotted himself to Usopp and Nami's side. Run, Nami, Usopp. He grabbed Usopp's and Nami's hands, one left and one right, and began to flee in one direction. On the execution platform, After a long period of bewilderment, Tashigi gritted her teeth, looking at the backs of the three fleeing, and commanded the Marines. Chase them. We must capture them. Splash, splash. The rain poured down. The streets, which had been packed with pedestrians upon entering the town, were now empty. Only the Marines, dressed in blue and white uniforms, remained, surging towards them like a tide from all directions. Where are Ganyu, Zoro, and Sanji? Luffy asked as he ran, his Gomu rubber arms occasionally extending to knock away blocking Marines. Don't worry about Sanji, he's with Ganyu. They've probably already returned to the ship, Nami said, waving a blue staff, repelling several Marines. This was a weapon Usopp had made for her. Zoro, that guy might still be in Logatown, Usopp said, pulling his slingshot as he ran. After running for some time, the number of Marines around them not only didn't decrease but actually grew larger and larger. It's over. We're surrounded. Usopp looked at the Marines, who had them completely encircled, with a terrified expression. There's no choice then, we'll just have to break through. Luffy looked at the Marines ahead, accelerated and ran to the very front, continuously extending his arms backward to build up power. Gomu Gomu. But before he could finish powering up, Zoro and Ganyu burst out from another corner. Ganyu drew her bow and knocked an arrow. The moment the frost arrow left the string, over a dozen Marines, maintaining their charging posture, were turned into ice sculptures. Zoro moved like lightning, like a fierce tiger entering a flock of sheep. Wherever his blade flashed, Marines fell in swaths. Luffy saw the two of them, a smile unconsciously appearing on his lips. Ganyu. Zoro. Ganyu and Zoro nodded to him. In this critical moment, there was no time for pleasantries, and they joined the fleeing group. With the three reunited, and Usopp and Nami assisting, their breakthrough was unstoppable. Before long, they broke through to the port. The sky seemed to be drenched in thick ink, a suffocating gloom. From time to time, ferocious lightning tore through the sky, unleashing deafening thunder, giving rise to strong winds and heavy rain, and surging waves. Port. Hey, where's our ship? Luffy's eyes widened as he stared at the spot where the Going Merry should have been securely docked. Now, however, it was empty, with only rain furiously hitting the vacant water. The Going Merry was gone. Over there. Look over there, quick. Usopp's eyes pierced through the rain, and he pointed towards a direction on the sea. Between the turbulent waves, the pirate ship, flying the Straw Hat Jolly Roger, was like a helpless falling leaf, bobbing and drifting with the waves, as if it would be swallowed by the sea in the next second. Faintly visible, Sanji stood alone on the deck, seemingly having spotted them, raising his hands high and shouting something loudly to them. But the distance was too great, the sound of the wind, rain, and waves completely drowned out his voice. Just as everyone's attention was drawn to the Going Merry. A group of figures in standard marine uniforms emerged from behind the warehouses and shelters around the port. They had obviously received smokers' orders and had been ambushing here for a long time. Puff 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 puff. A hail of bullets, as dense as fine rain, shot towards everyone. At this moment, Gomu Gomu balloon. Luffy reacted extremely quickly, leaping to the front of everyone in one stride, taking a deep breath, his abdomen instantly inflated like a balloon, transforming into a giant, elastic Gomu rubber ball, completely shielding all his companions behind him. Thump 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 thump. All the bullets struck his belly, making a dong dong sound, and then bounced back even faster. Ah! My gun! Watch out for the ricochet! Behind them, the Marines, surprised cries of pain and shouts of alarm immediately rang out. Don't use guns. He is a devil fruit user, ordinary bullets are ineffective against him. First squad, fire the nets. Second squad, immediately switch to cutlasses and prepare for close quarters assault. The Marines of Logatown were far more elite than those in other areas of the East Blue. After a brief moment of chaos, they immediately changed their battle strategy. Bang bang bang. Accompanied by crisp firing sounds, countless unusually large beast-catching nets, woven with metal wires, unfurled in the air, like a net from heaven and earth, descending upon the Straw Hat Pirates with an unnerving whistle. Whoa! There are too many. Luffy was greatly alarmed. Compared to straightforward bullets and cannonballs, this type of weapon, specifically used for capture and restraint, was indeed the type he was least adept at handling. We're finished. We're really completely surrounded now. Usopp said in a panic. They were currently standing at the port by the sea, but the Marines were closing in from all directions of the island. Facing a sky full of beast-catching nets and a group of Marines charging with swords, their only apparent retreat was to jump into the sea. Ganyu. Luffy suddenly turned to the blue-haired girl beside him and shouted loudly. At this moment, only her ability could allow them to cross the sea and return to the Going Merry. Ganyu nodded gently, her face as calm as water. She extended her slender palm forward, and a sudden chill filled the air. An ancient longbow, glowing with a hazy frost, materialized out of thin air. She drew the bow, nocked an arrow. With a burst of biting frost, an arrow shot into the Marine crowd, freezing a whole row of Marines charging at the forefront. And then, she turned neatly, her heel stomping heavily on the ground, instantly leaping dozens of meters high, the wind whipping, her ice blue hair fluttering with it, a pair of red and purple eyes filled with sternness, and she drew her bow again. This time, the arrowhead pointed directly at the roaring, boiling sea below. Flowing sky. A clear, cold shout rang out, and the ice crystal arrow, imbued with chill, left the string, transforming into a brilliant blue stream of light, and plunged into the surging waves. Sizzle sizzle. A surprising scene unfolded. The originally turbulent and overwhelming sea surface, with the arrow's impact point as its center, emitted an ear-piercing freezing sound and quickly calmed down. The ice layer rapidly spread and thickened. Almost instantly, a straight, wide path of ice, like a miracle, appeared on the sea, extending from the edge of the port all the way to the distant, tiny Going Merry, reaching a length of 100 meters. Then, Ganyu's toes lightly tapped again, as if stepping on an invisible staircase. She turned again, drew her bow, and pointed her arrow at the Marines below who were trying to reorganize their attack. You all go back to the ship now. Below, everyone, even those who were already accustomed to Ganyu's abilities, were still greatly shocked to see the sea surface below almost frozen for 100 meters in all directions. Hearing her voice, they immediately understood that she intended to cover their retreat alone, buying them time to escape. Having traveled together for many days, they had long developed deep understanding and trust in each other. They all knew Ganyu's strength and also knew she possessed the ability to fly. So, in the current situation, it was the best choice for her to intercept the pursuers. Jump. Luffy's face instantly returned to its carefree smile, and his Gomu rubber arm swished and stretched, wrapping around Nami and Usopp's waists. Wait, Luffy. We can walk ourselves. Realizing what he was about to do, Nami cried out in alarm. Yes. Luffy, no. Usopp's expression was terrified. Luffy seemed not to hear, and without hesitation, he leapt off the port with the two of them, landing steadily on the smooth, solid ice path below, gradually moving further away. Only their incredibly terrified screams could be heard. Zoro looked up at the blue figure in the sky, sheathed his sword, and also leapt, following in Luffy and the others' footsteps. In the sky, seeing that her companions had all left, Ganyu breathed a sigh of relief, no longer having any worries, and calmly watched the Marines below. She harbored little ill will towards these Logatown Marines. Whether it was Smoker or these ordinary Marine soldiers, their duty was to capture pirates, and they upheld the justice proclaimed by the Marines. Therefore, whether facing Smoker or this group of Marines, Ganyu's actions were considered gentle. However, their stances were ultimately different. If they insisted on relentless pursuit, for the sake of her companion's safe departure, she could only get serious. She's in the sky. Quick, concentrate fire, shoot her down. The Marines also realized the immense threat posed by this individual who could control large areas with ice from the air. With the order given, gunshots erupted again, and a more intense barrage of bullets than before poured towards Ganyu in the sky. Ganyu's expression remained unchanged, and her body stayed still in the air, not moving. But as the rapidly approaching bullets were about to hit her, a transparent, icy protective shield appeared out of thin air about a foot in front of her. The bullets struck it like an indestructible iron plate, sparks flying, a series of clattering impact sounds, and then all were blocked and bounced away. Again, useless. The Marines were dumbfounded. It was another ability user who ignored bullets. It was hard to imagine that bullets, which had been so effective against pirates in the East Blue, were now completely useless. Moreover, what made Ganyu even more troublesome than Luffy was that she could fly, constantly staying in the air. Besides firearms, they had no means of countering her. If only Marine Captain Smoker were here. Many Marine soldiers had this thought simultaneously. Why hadn't their powerful highest-ranking officer, who possessed the Logia-type smoke fruit ability, appeared until now? Were they really just going to watch these pirates escape from Logatown at their leisure? The Marines felt bitter and helpless, only able to stare longingly at the incredibly mysterious, beautiful figure in the sky, a deep sense of powerlessness spreading through their hearts. Frost Arrow, aren't you being a bit too arrogant? Just then, an angry roar exploded. A trail of white smoke shot from within the town at an astonishing speed. A man with gray-white short hair, his marine coat flapping in the wind behind him, soared into the sky, propelled by the smoke, heading straight for Ganyu in the air. White Snake. Rolling white smoke gathered and formed in front of him, instantly transforming into a ferocious white giant python, its smoky mouth wide open, carrying an aura of devouring everything as it lunged at the blue-haired girl suspended in the air. Marine Captain Smoker. You're finally here. Seeing this, the Marines below, whose morale had been somewhat low, were immediately invigorated and erupted in enthusiastic cheers. Their Marine captain had finally arrived at the most crucial moment. On the other side, Luffy and a few companions boarded the Going Merry, then suddenly turned their heads, feeling something, their gazes narrowing as they looked at the white smoky shadow rising into the sky. Who is that? Although he couldn't immediately discern what kind of ability that white smoke represented, his intuition told him this marine was no ordinary person. Zoro, arms crossed, added with a grave expression, the marine captain of Logatown is likely an ability user related to smoke. I've fought him before, he's very strong. Is that the marine captain called Smoker? I've heard of him, he's a terrifyingly strong marine. Nami looked out at the battle in the sky, her eyes revealing worry. Learning that Ganyu had to face such a strong enemy alone, she couldn't help but feel a pang of anxiety. Nani. Is Miss Ganyu in danger? Sanji immediately couldn't sit still, rushing to the ship's rail, anxiously looking at the white smoke attacking Ganyu. I have to go help her. Wait, Sanji. Usopp quickly stopped him, pointing at the sky and saying helplessly, you can't fly, so it's useless even if you go. These words were like a bucket of cold water poured over Sanji's head. He pounded the ship's rail in frustration, his face filled with unwillingness. It was a perfect opportunity to show his gentlemanly demeanor to Miss Ganyu and win her heart, but he could only fret because he couldn't fly. Luffy gazed at the distant battle, and after a moment of silence, suddenly issued a captain's order, let's set sail first. Except for Sanji, who was somewhat reluctant, the crew obeyed his command. And just as the Going Merry slowly began to turn, the battle in the sky had already entered a fierce stage. Boom! A heavy punch, enveloped in white smoke, slammed towards Ganyu, but it was firmly blocked by an icy barrier that suddenly appeared in front of her. Break! For me! Smoker roared, and the white smoke behind his fist suddenly accelerated, emitting a roar like an engine. A surge of power erupted, and the ice crystal barrier shattered in response, turning into countless ice shards scattering everywhere. Almost simultaneously, the giant python formed by white smoke below also seized the opportunity to lunge, forming an upper and lower pincer attack with Smoker's fist. Bang! Facing such a powerful offensive, Ganyu remained calm, striking out with a palm to directly counter Smoker's fist, then using the force to drift backward, narrowly avoiding the white snake attacking from below. While drifting backward, she had already drawn her bow and nocked an arrow, and a cold light shot through the air. Smoker seemed unable to dodge and was hit squarely in the forehead by the ice arrow. However, the expected scene of blood and gore did not occur, half of his face dissipated into the air like smoke, and his entire body transformed into a cloud of white smoke, slowly scattering. I've already experienced your ability. Suddenly. Smoker's voice suddenly came from behind Ganyu. Unbeknownst to her, a wisp of white smoke had silently drifted behind her, reforming into Smoker's figure. It turned out, the white snake attack from below was just a feint, the real killing blow was his displacement strike using the properties of smoke. He had used his fist to smash the blue-haired girl's barrier defense head-on, forcing her to lean backward, then used his ability to flash his main body behind her, creating a decisive strike. He raised his specialized jeet, aiming the kairoseki embedded tip at the blue-haired girl's semi-exposed back. If this strike succeeded, any ability user would instantly lose their power and fall from the sky. And the Marines below were already standing by, ready to completely surround her as soon as she landed. In fact, if it hadn't been for a certain man who suddenly appeared and delayed him, Smoker would have arrived on the scene much earlier to capture this group of infinitely potential rookie pirates in one fell swoop. However, catching one of them was better than letting them all escape. He had even prepared to abandon Logatown, which he had guarded for many years, and pursue this group of pirates into the Grand Line. In his eyes, this group of rookie pirates would undoubtedly become a major threat to the Marines in the future and must be completely eliminated before they could grow. Bang! The kairoseki embedded tip of the jeet struck the blue-haired girl's smooth back without incident. Upon seeing this, Smoker quickly reined in some of his strength. He was worried that if he used too much force, he might pierce through the blue-haired girl's back, and such a bloody scene was not what he wanted to see. Ultimately, Frost Arrow was not one of those heinous pirates on the Grand Line whom he felt he absolutely had to kill. However, in the next moment, Smoker's expression suddenly froze, his eyes wide, as if he had seen something incredible. How could you? The jeet struck that smooth, fair back, yet it was like a stone sinking into the sea, with no reaction whatsoever. The expected scene of an ability user weakening and falling to the ground did not occur. The blue-haired girl's figure, suspended in the air, didn't even sway in the slightest, as if the strike that should have rendered any ability user powerless was merely a gentle tap. The blue-haired girl slowly turned her head, extended a slender hand, and without dodging, directly grasped the kairoseki embedded part of the jeet's tip. She actually touched kairoseki on her own accord. Impossible, how are you unharmed? Are you not an ability user? Smoker's eyes widened, and he roared in disbelief. For a moment, his brain raced, countless thoughts flashing through his mind. He thought of the only possibility. It was said that a very few exceptionally strong individuals in the new world of the Grand Line could, through long-term exposure to kairoseki for training, resist its effects to a certain extent. Could it be that this blue-haired girl was a strong individual of that caliber? No matter how confused Smoker was at the moment, Ganyu had no intention of conversing with this stubborn marine. She firmly grasped the weapon, activating the Kilin's power hidden beneath this delicate human girl's shell. Smoker's face suddenly changed, he felt an unimaginably terrifying force transmit from the weapon. His hand uncontrollably loosened, and he could only watch as his weapon was snatched into her hand. You're going to. Watching the blue-haired girl naturally flip the jeet, aiming its kairoseki embedded tip at him, Smoker's heart sank. White. He hastily activated his devil fruit ability, wanting to naturalize his body and escape. But he was still a step too late. The iron tip with the kairoseki struck his chest. His body, which was about to dissipate, was forced to re-solidify. Smoker grunted, completely powerless, and plummeted straight down. Splash. A heavy splash echoed on a patch of unfrozen sea, sending up a spray of waves. The strongest marine in Logatown thus fell into the sea under everyone's watchful eyes. The Marines below were already stunned, unable to believe that their Marine Captain Smoker had been defeated so easily. Marine Captain Smoker. After a while, someone shouted in alarm, and several Marines quickly jumped into the water to rescue him. Ganyu watched their actions for a moment, then gently released her grip, and the jeet fell from the sky, landing with a clang on the port ground. Afterward, she didn't linger, turning and flying towards the Going Merry. It wasn't until Ganyu's figure vanished into the sky that Tashigi, with the Marine branch team that had rushed from the plaza, hurried to the port. The sight before her instantly stunned her. Captain Smoker was being dragged ashore from the sea by several Marine soldiers, soaking wet and looking disheveled. Captain Smoker. What happened to you? Tashigi ran over in a panic. Because she was in too much of a hurry, she didn't notice the jeet weapon that Ganyu had just thrown down from the sky onto the ground. With a thump, she tripped over the weapon, lost her balance, and fell into the sea herself. Sergeant Tashigi. The Marines stared in shock, exclaiming. Fortunately, Tashigi was not a devil fruit user and, being a Marine, was an excellent swimmer. Soon, she resurfaced, then shivered. So cold. Tashigi hugged her trembling arms, shivering as she climbed ashore like a drowned rat. Her soaked marine uniform clung tightly to her body, outlining her curves, which caused many Marines to blush and turn their heads away. Smoker, who had just caught his breath, spat out a few mouthfuls of seawater. Give her a coat too. Seeing this, he first had a Marine next to him fetch her new clothes, then said irritably. Idiot. This seawater was frozen by that woman's ability, of course it's cold. Frozen. Tashigi, wrapped in a large coat given to her by a Marine, turned her head with a confused expression. When she clearly saw the scene on the sea, she couldn't help but widen her eyes. She saw. In the midst of the turbulent sea, there was now a straight, 100-meter-long path of ice. And at the end of the ice path, on the distant horizon, the pirate ship flying the Straw Hat's skull flag was slowly advancing towards the guiding light, symbolizing Reverse Mountain's peak, several thousand meters away. On the Going Merry. Thunder roared in the sky, strong winds flapped the sails, and heavy rain lashed wildly on the deck. The 6 members of the Straw Hat Pirates, Luffy, Zoro, Nami, Usopp, Sanji, and Ganyu, who had just arrived belatedly from the sky. Everyone was gathered around a wooden barrel. Although everyone was soaked by the rain, with hair sticking to their faces and clothes clinging to their bodies, their faces were all beaming with smiles. In the distance, a bright light adorned the distant mountains. That was the entrance to the Grand Line. They were finally entering the Grand Line. The 6 exchanged smiles, and Luffy was the first to stomp his foot heavily on the barrel, shouting loudly. I'm going to be the Pirate King. I'm going to be a brave warrior of the sea. I'm going to be a great swordsman. I'm going to find all blue. I'm going to draw a world map. I'm going to. Everyone shouted out their dreams, their voices passionate and surging, even overpowering the waves and the heavy rain. But, when it came to Ganyu, she opened her mouth, looked at the 5 pairs of expectant eyes, but suddenly became speechless. She stood still, a hint of confusion appearing in her eyes. What was her dream? In her previous life, her dream for the first 18 years was to get into a good university. After entering university, her dream became finding a good job after graduation, but unfortunately, before she could graduate, she transmigrated to this world. Now, she had a new body, a different gender, and naturally joined the main characters group. Logically, her dream should be to accompany these people, whom she had only seen on screen, on their adventures, witness Luffy become the Pirate King, watch Zoro ascend to become the world's strongest swordsman. But could such a dream truly be called her own dream? Ganyu, hurry up and say it. Luffy, seeing Ganyu remain silent for a long time, couldn't help but show a hint of urgency on his face. How could you not have a dream? Yeah, just say anything, like becoming the world's strongest archer or something. Usopp suggested, scratching his wet hair. Sanji propped his chin, squinting as he surveyed Ganyu's entire body. Ganyu was also soaked by the rain, and she wasn't wearing much to begin with, and now. Sanji wiped the blood from his nose and said, how about the world's strongest beauty? In my opinion, that title should have already fallen to Miss Ganyu. Nami nodded in agreement. Even as a woman, she had to admire Ganyu's authoritative beauty. She thought for a moment, her eyes suddenly lighting up. The world's strongest also works, right? Ganyu might become the strongest woman in the world someday. What is all this? Ganyu sighed helplessly, feeling that her companion's ideas were too fantastical. Zoro suddenly smiled, looking at Ganyu and saying, her dream can be more than one, right? Ah. Everyone was startled by his words, fell silent for a moment, then suddenly looked up. That's right. If it's Ganyu, she can totally achieve multiple dreams at once. Hehe, the world's strongest beauty and the world's strongest, to be on the same ship with such a Miss Ganyu, I'm too happy. Hey, Ganyu, hurry up and shout it out, I can't wait any longer. Wait, you guys aren't serious, are you? Ganyu bit her lower lip, her eyes flickering, saying with a hint of disbelief. Of course. X5. Everyone responded in unison. This. Ganyu didn't know what to say. After a long deliberation, she smiled helplessly and nodded. She raised her slender, long leg, encased in black tights, and gently tapped the edge of the barrel with her shoe tip. She reached up to smooth her hair, which had been disheveled by the sea breeze, her cheeks flushed, and closed her eyes, shouting. I am going to be the world's strongest bow, the world's strongest archer, the world's strongest. After loudly proclaiming this embarrassing dream, Ganyu slowly opened her eyes, only to be met with 5 faces bearing mischievous smiles. Ganyu's expression stiffened. PFF'd. She actually shouted it out. Ha 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 ha, Ganyu, you're too cute. Luffy and Usopp collapsed on the ground laughing. Nami laughed so hard she was shaking. Sanji was trying hard to hold it in but his mouth kept twitching, and Zoro watched with an expression of enjoyment as the damselet's cheeks went from rosy to completely red with embarrassment. You guys. Seeing this, Ganyu immediately understood that she had been tricked by them all together. It was highly likely that while she was fighting Smoker alone, these people had already planned this prank. It was too much, she had just been thinking so seriously. For a moment, Ganyu was both shy and annoyed. She covered her burning cheeks with both hands, stomped heavily on the green-haired swordsman's shoe, and then kneaded the rubber man's face fiercely with her hand, before huffily rushing back into the ship's cabin alone. Bang! The bedroom door was slammed shut, and Ganyu flopped onto the bed, burying herself in the covers. It was too embarrassing, she didn't want to leave her room all day today. Ah, my leg. On the deck, Zoro sat on the ground, holding one leg, his face full of pain. Everyone looked at him. It was imaginable how much it would hurt to be stepped on by an angry Ganyu. However, the instigator was not worthy of sympathy. He was the one who first proposed it. Why wasn't it me who got stepped on? Sanji clutched his head in frustration. That last line should have been said by me. Is this the time to be concerned about this? It's all your fault. Ganyu is clearly angry. What do we do now? Nami put her hands on her hips, scolding all the male crew members on the ship. Hey, Miss Navigator, Usopp mercilessly exposed her hypocrisy. Didn't you also laugh happily just now? I clearly saw tears of laughter in your eyes. Nami was instantly speechless, a hint of guilt flashing across her face. She lightly coughed, trying to change the subject. Anyway, we need to find a way to appease Ganyu. She single-handedly stopped the entire marine of Logatown just now. That's right. Sanji immediately became serious, his expression resolute. I will prepare a special apology dessert for Miss Ganyu. I want to reserve one. As soon as he heard about dessert, Luffy immediately raised his Gomu rubber arm, his eyes sparkling. I want one too. Usopp also raised his hand high. Nami looked at her companions who had once again veered off topic, and said angrily, Hey. Are you even listening to me? Ganyu being angry didn't really have much to do with them. But she shared a room with Ganyu. What if Ganyu didn't open the door for her? Where would she sleep at night? Wait, why does that sound a little strange? You're overthinking it, Nami. Ganyu wouldn't be that petty. Usopp patted Nami's shoulder, pointing at Zoro on the deck and saying, Look, she's been traveling with this lost person for so long. If she had a bad temper, she would have beaten him to death by now. Now that you mention it, that makes some sense. Nami nodded thoughtfully, feeling much more at ease. She suddenly remembered that before she joined, Ganyu had been alone with Luffy and Zoro. It was hard to imagine how annoying it must be to get along with two troublesome guys like that. Zoro's forehead twitched, and he gritted his teeth, saying, You two, don't badmouth people in front of them. And who's the lost person? You. Times 5. 4 hands simultaneously pointed at him. A few hours later, Ganyu pushed open her door, stepped onto the deck, and returned to the cabin on the first floor. Her expression had returned to its usual peacefulness, as if the previous little interlude had never happened. In fact, during the battle in Logatown, she had consumed too much element power and was extremely mentally exhausted, almost collapsing into sleep as soon as she returned to her room. Her current body's physical strength was no different from her original body. Smoker's weapon striking her back hadn't even left a red mark. However, the element power within her, although it had been continuously recovering at a considerable speed since she joined the Straw Hat Pirates, was still less than 1/10 of its full strength. However, there was one thing to be happy about. She vaguely felt that this body's capacity for element power seemed to have no upper limit. This meant that as long as she continued to stay with the main characters, her strength could continue to grow, endlessly strengthening. It was even possible that one day she might surpass her original body. In the ship's living room, the companions were gathered around the conference table, also used as a dining table, arguing fiercely, seemingly discussing some important matter. The first to notice Ganyu was Luffy, who had always been slacking off. Yo, Ganyu, you're finally out. Are you hungry? He stretched his Gomu rubber neck and leaned in front of Ganyu, his eyes looking at her expectantly. Not yet hungry. Ganyu gently shook her head and naturally sat down in the empty seat next to Luffy. Not hungry. That's too bad. Luffy dejectedly retracted his neck. If Ganyu said she was hungry, Sanji would definitely cook. Then, he would be able to get another free meal. On the other side. When Nami saw Ganyu, she quickly pushed over a nautical chart taken from the buggy pirates and pointed to a reddish stone wall that spanned the entire map. Ganyu, you've come at just the right time, we've encountered a problem. Nami's brows were tightly furrowed. This is the legendary entrance to the Grand Line Reverse Mountain. We are infinitely close to it, but we can't see the entrance at all, only a current flowing upwards along the mountain path. Could it be that our going Mary has to climb the mountain along this current? Impossible. Usopp waved his hands repeatedly, climbing a mountain with a ship. No matter how you think about it, that's too exaggerated. Zoro and Sanji also shook their heads slightly. After Nami proposed this bold conjecture, they all felt it defied common sense. On the deck just now, they had all witnessed the hundreds of meters high reverse mountain with their own eyes. How could a ship possibly climb it? Ganyu understood upon hearing this, and smiled with pursed lips. Under the puzzled gaze of the crowd, she extended her slender finger and gently tapped the bottom of reverse mountain on the nautical chart, then slowly slid upwards along a winding line until she reached the peak. No matter how incredible it seems, Nami's idea is correct. Ganyu's voice was soft yet firm. The only way to enter the Grand Line, besides forcing your way through the calm belt, is to climb this mountain. Then, she further explained to her bewildered companions. The Red Line is a ring-shaped continent that spans the entire world, intersecting the Grand Line in a cross shape, forming two intersection points, and thus dividing the sea into four regions: east, west, south, and north. And Reverse Mountain is one of the two major intersection points of the Red Line and the Grand Line, with four inverse currents located in the east, west, south, and north, leading directly to the summit. Pirates from the four seas who wish to enter the Grand Line must ascend Reverse Mountain via the inverse current of their respective region, and finally enter the Grand Line through a downward current. But how can we get up there? Usopp was still confused. Don't worry about that. Nami patted her chest, a confident smile blooming on her face again. At first, I wasn't sure if this idea was correct, but since Ganyu has confirmed it, I will definitely be able to lead everyone over this mountain. Soon after, when the Going Mary finally reached the foot of Reverse Mountain, a turbulent current surging upwards along the peak suddenly appeared before everyone's eyes. It's actually, really flowing upwards. Everyone's eyes widened, staring in disbelief at this natural wonder that defied logic. Luffy swallowed, excitedly and eagerly grabbing the railing. Nami, how should we get up? First, put all the items on the deck into the cabin and warehouse, then furl the sails. Nami began to direct methodically, her voice imbued with the confidence of a professional navigator. Everyone must go to control the rudder, and be sure to listen carefully to every command I give. Everyone quickly sprang into action. Finally, when all preparations were complete, the Going Mary was carefully steered into the entrance of that inverse current. The moment the hull made contact with the inverse current, it vibrated violently, and everyone held their breath. Under the expectant yet anxious gazes of everyone on board, the Going Mary's bow was the first to touch the illogical reverse current. With a violent jolt, the ship slowly began to tilt, and an invisible, immense thrust surged from behind, steadily pushing the entire ship onto the waterway leading up the mountain. We're going up. Amidst Luffy's excited shouts, the ship tilted completely, and following the current that snaked up the mountain, it began its ascent. On the deck, apart from Ganyu who stood as steady as if on flat ground, everyone else was struggling to find their footing. Luffy's Gomu rubber limbs were tightly wrapped around the mast. Zoro and Sanji braced themselves against opposite sides of the cabin, while Usopp lay sprawled on the deck, his hands gripping the railing tightly. The smartest was Nami. She had long since embraced Ganyu's slender waist and was now calmly giving orders. Quick, pull the sail. Control the rudder. Everyone, having already divided their tasks, immediately sprang into action. Luffy immediately stretched out his arms and pulled down the sail, and the ship's slow ascent suddenly accelerated. Sanji and Usopp immediately braced their feet against the cabin behind them, supporting Zoro's shoulders from left and right. Zoro's arm muscles bulged, veins prominent, as he controlled the direction of the rudder under Nami's command. Ganyu naturally wasn't idle either. She intently scanned the current for any potential obstacles, and whenever she spotted a reef or rock slope that posed a threat to the ship, she would knock an arrow to her bow. The arrow shot through the air, shattering the obstacles and clearing the path for the Going Merry. And so, with everyone's concerted effort, the Going Merry successfully reached the summit of Reverse Mountain. To their delight, the ship sustained almost no damage. Everyone, attention, were going down the mountain. After reaching the summit, before them lay a downhill path formed by the confluence of 4 reverse currents. Compared to the ascent, this waterway had a steeper slope and the current was several times more turbulent. But for an experienced navigator, going downhill is always easier than going uphill. As long as the rudder is handled well, there shouldn't be any major problems. However, click. A crisp sound of wood snapping suddenly broke the recently relaxed atmosphere. The rudder, it broke. Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp were dumbfounded, their faces instantly turning pale as they stared at the broken rudder handle in Zoro's hand. Why did you use so much force? How else am I supposed to steer? Ah, it's over, it's over. Losing the rudder meant being unable to control the ship's direction. Even a slight deviation in direction during the descent could cause them to crash into the steep mountain walls on either side, with unimaginable consequences. But fortunately, the ship had a Kylin immortal beast who could alter the terrain. Seeing this, Ganyu didn't hesitate. She summoned her ice bow and, in an instant, shot an arrow to each side of the ship. The arrows landed in the turbulent current, immediately solidifying into 2 crystal-clear ice fences, like a racetrack, firmly confining the Going Merry to the correct course. In this way, the ship glided smoothly downwards, at a fast pace, yet much more steadily than when going uphill, putting everyone at ease. We're saved. Ah, Miss Ganyu, she's so reliable. Ha ha ha. I can already see the Grand Line. Now we just have to rush down. The crew's panic vanished, replaced by boundless anticipation for the Grand Line. Everyone gathered at the bow, gazing at the vast expanse of sea below. At first glance, this sea area was no different from the East Blue. As far as the eye could see, there was only azure water. Aside from a mountain-sized dark shadow directly ahead, there was no other distinction. Wait, a mountain. Why is there still a mountain? Haven't we already crossed Reverse Mountain? Luffy asked, puzzled. That's impossible. After crossing Reverse Mountain and passing the Twin Capes at its base, it should be an endless ocean. Nami frowned, instinctively looking at Ganyu beside her. Usually, whenever she didn't understand something, asking Ganyu was the right thing to do. She was the person on the entire ship who knew the most about this world. Nami sometimes even suspected that Ganyu might have been to the Grand Line before. Look closely, that's not a mountain, but a whale. Ganyu gazed at the huge dark shadow directly ahead, a hint of melancholy in her eyes. The whale before them was named Laboon, approximately 400 meters tall, almost the size of a small island. 50 years ago, it was left here by a group of pirates entering the Grand Line, who promised to return to see it after circling the world. But clearly, that pirate crew was annihilated in the Grand Line, and the only survivor was trapped in the calm belt, unable to leave. This whale had waited at Reverse Mountain for 50 years, still awaiting that almost impossible reunion. A whale. Everyone was stunned. After looking carefully for a long time, they finally realized that the mountain before them was indeed a living creature. It raised its head to the sky, more than half its body exposed from the sea, its gaping maw like a black hole, emitting a peculiar cry of boo-oo-oo. As the Going Merry continued its descent, the distance between them grew shorter. Whether it was an illusion or not, Ganyu felt the whale's eyes slowly turn and look in her direction. No, it wasn't an illusion, it was really watching her. Ganyu was somewhat perplexed, staring directly into the distant whale's eyes, engaging in a gaze across 100 meters. The world seemed to stand still at this moment, the sound of the wind, the current, and the tides all vanished. What remained in her ears was only a tender, somewhat restless, yet expectant and longing ethereal voice. It was probably asking, "Who are you? Why are you as small as a human? Have you seen a ship that always makes a ooh sound?" Ganyu's pupils contracted. She realized that Laboon was communicating with her telepathically. She thought for a moment, then opened her mouth and gave a silent response. The response was, "We are a pirate crew who have just entered the Grand Line. We haven't seen that ship, but I know there are still people alive on that ship, and he is waiting for his reunion with you." A few seconds later, an incredibly loud whale cry suddenly erupted across the sea, its sound shaking the heavens and earth, reverberating throughout the entire ocean. After a long while, an ethereal voice once again echoed in Ganyu's mind, "Really?" Ganyu felt its joyful emotion and couldn't help but feel a little happy, softly chuckling, "Really?" As the Going Merry completely dropped into the sea, a brief, unknown communication ended. The giant whale before them no longer cried, as if its emotions had stabilized, and it slightly lowered its head, as if watching the pirate ship that was drawing closer to it. "What's going on? Did it find us?" Its actions greatly frightened everyone on board. "Let's run. Our ship can't withstand this behemoth." Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp frantically took out the oars from the storage, preparing to row away from the colossal creature. Only Luffy had a strange look in his eyes, his gaze darting back and forth between Ganyu and the whale. "Don't worry, it doesn't mean us any harm." Looking at the three busy people, Ganyu smiled faintly, her voice soft. She could feel that the whale's emotions had completely stabilized. The reason it had been staring at their ship was actually to bid her farewell. Upon hearing this, everyone stopped rowing. After a long while. "It really is just staring at us, huh? Is it curious?" Usopp cautiously poked his head out, carefully observing Laboon. "Looking closely, this big guy is actually quite cute," Nami said, leaning on the ship's railing, gazing at Laboon's rounded head. "But it's too big, almost the size of an island." Sanji lit a cigarette, his voice filled with awe. "The Grand Line is really different from the East Blue, even a random whale is this massive," Zoro said, crossing his arms and shaking his head. Most of the people on the ship were thick-skinned. After confirming their safety, they became enthusiastically discussed this unique whale. Luffy, however, uncharacteristically didn't join the discussion. He stared at Ganyu, his brow slightly furrowed. "Ganyu, did you hear anything just now?" "Huh." Hearing this, Ganyu was a little surprised but quickly remembered his unique ability from the original story, the ability to hear the voice of all things. Those with this ability can hear sea kings, certain ancient creatures, and even the voices engraved in the poneglyphs. It sounded like communication. "I heard a strange voice, and also your voice. Did I mishear?" "No, you didn't mishear." Ganyu thought for a moment, then frankly admitted, "It was indeed me talking to that whale just now." She told Luffy Laboon's 50-year wait, and the story of the pirates who never returned, in full detail. "So that's how it is." Luffy nodded, a rare look of melancholy on his face. He looked up, gazing at the mountain-like whale, lost in thought. A long time later, under the astonished gaze of his crew, he suddenly leapt to the top of the mast, standing at the highest point of the Going Merry, and shouted loudly. "Big guy, can you hear my voice?" Everyone below was stunned. They exchanged glances, seeing the horror in each other's eyes. "This guy, he's not going to provoke this whale, is he?" Usopp muttered softly. Everyone nodded after hearing this, feeling it was very possible. "Oh no, stop him." Just as they were about to stop him from doing something foolish, Luffy's voice came again. "You're really big. With a body like that, there's no way you can sail the Grand Line with us, right? What on earth is this guy talking about?" The Straw Hat Pirates were confused. Did Luffy know this whale? Why was he saying such inexplicable things? You should live a long time, right? A few years. A few decades. Or a few centuries. Let's make a promise, big guy. If you don't wait for those people, then wait for us to circle the Grand Line once, and then we'll come back to see you. You absolutely must not leave early, or die. As Luffy's booming shouts echoed across the sea, the expressions of the Straw Hat Pirates gradually softened from initial confusion, and smiles unconsciously appeared on everyone's faces. They vaguely realized why Luffy would suddenly make a promise with this whale. When Laboon's clear whale song echoed across the sea in response, Luffy laughed heartily and excitedly shouted down. Set sail. But just then, a old yet powerful voice suddenly came from Laboon's back. Wait a minute. Immediately after, an old man with white hair, appearing to be 70 or 80 but with an exceptionally robust body, emerged from Laboon's back. He came out of the whale's body. Under everyone's shocked gaze, the old man leapt from the whale's back, descending gracefully towards the Going Mary's deck in a perfect high dive posture. Almost everyone was stunned by his incredibly spectacular entrance. They watched as the old man fell from the sky, headfirst, and crashed heavily onto their deck. Click. A large crater exploded in the deck, the old man's eyes were unfocused, and a large amount of blood flowed from where his head contacted the deck, soaking a large section of the planking. Nani? My ship. Luffy's eyes widened as he exclaimed. This old man isn't going to die like this, is he? Who is he? Why did he jump from such a high place? The ship immediately descended into chaos. Sanji and Usopp quickly helped up the old man who had fallen from the sky, checking his injuries. This is bad, he's bleeding a lot from his head, and we don't have a doctor on board, what should we do? Is there a doctor nearby? Yes. Surprisingly, the old man slowly opened his eyes, pointed to himself, and said with a strange pride in his voice. I am the only doctor at Reverse Mountain. Oh, I see. Everyone was stunned for a moment, then angrily said, if you're the doctor, then we're doomed, aren't we? It's all right, the old man smiled weakly, pointing at Laboon nearby, as long as you go inside Laboon's body and get my medical kit, I can heal my own injuries. Laboon also seemed to have noticed the old man was injured, and at this moment, it brought its head closer, its eyes glancing at the ship. Laboon, are you talking about this whale? Go inside its body. Do you mean go in through its mouth? And can we really get out after going in? Why is your medical kit inside a whale's stomach? No, you seem to have come out of this whale's body. The Straw Hat Pirates gathered together, discussing how to save the old man. Finally, Ganyu couldn't stand the farce anymore and gently flicked her finger. A stream of ice shot into the old man's head wound, and the next moment, the injury began to heal at a visible speed. Among the Straw Hat Pirates, besides Zoro, this was the first time the others had seen Ganyu use this ability. They gasped repeatedly, asking Ganyu how she did it. Ganyu briefly explained that it was the effect of her Qilin saliva. Sanji seemed to have a sudden realization, his gaze falling on Zoro's chest. He finally understood why Zoro's injuries had healed so quickly back then. It turned out he had received Ganyu's treatment beforehand. Thinking of this, Sanji couldn't help but stroke his chin, pondering whether to find an opportunity to get a more serious injury next time, to receive Miss Ganyu's saliva treatment. Little girl, thank you. After the white-haired old man recovered from his injuries, he sat on the deck, looked deeply at Ganyu, and said, after entering the Grand Line, it's best not to easily show off this ability of yours. Otherwise, many formidable individuals will become interested in you. Understood, I will. Ganyu nodded in thanks, understanding that the old man's advice came from good intentions. After the chaos ended, everyone looked at the old man. Hey, weird old man, who are you? What are you doing jumping onto our ship? Sanji asked impolitely. Perhaps it was due to years of oppression from Zeph at the Bharati restaurant, but his tone was rather harsh when facing the old man. My name is Crocus, and I am the lighthouse keeper of Reverse Mountain. Crocus pointed to the two lighthouses at the foot of the nearby mountain, then said seriously. I'm here to thank you. Although I don't know how you did it, because of your appearance, Laboon's mood has calmed down a lot. This is the first time I've seen him so peaceful in 50 years. The Straw Hat Pirates on board gradually quieted down, listening to the old man tell a story about a pirate crew and a whale. Thanks for watching.